Hey, we're trying to build mythology here, Steiner. Come on.
No, you're gonna get a hard dose of reality here.
Hey. Where has the past influenced me now? How has it affected me? And in what way can I harness that positivity from it, the good stuff, going forward? Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Hey, man. How's it going?
Oh, it says that might not be the best thing, right?
Did it? That's weird. Why did I use that one?
I had to... whoa, there he is. Holy crap.
How's it going, man? Steiner, you look fantastic.
Oh, thank you. It's good to see you guys.
Oh, it's good to see you too, man. I've been all day, I'm like, what's going to happen when you finally see him? And I'm going to get emotional. That's what's going to happen. Jesus. Been looking forward to seeing your beautiful face all day.
It's been far too long since we've seen each other. So
I know. Oh, man. How you doing?
Doing great. I'm out here enjoying Twinkie's hospitality, and it's been a fantastic time. And now I get to cap this off talking with you gentlemen. So
that's awesome.
Couldn't be better.
Well, welcome to Long Walk Short Drink. And welcome anyone listening out here in the internet. This is episode 35 of Long Walk Short Drink, and joining us, actually you might have heard two voices by now. We have joining us is Twinkie, back at it again, and then is the third cabin kid to join us on the show, Steiner. Thank you for joining us, Steiner. Man, it's good to see you.
Welcome. For the invite. Yeah, thanks for having me, guys.
How long has it been since we've... I know we're not in each other's physical presences, but how long has it been? I've seen you in the last few years, not really gotten to hang out. But what about you, Palmer? How long has it been between the two of you?
Steiner's hair wasn't touching his shoulders yet.
That's true. I'm thinking it was maybe 2008.
Yeah, that sounds about right. Yeah. It's crazy. It just when it was, I think it was at one of Dave's shows, at Musica, and we just happened to bump into each other over a cigarette, in the back behind Musica there.
Yeah, that sounds right.
I feel like that's where I last saw you too, the Musica.
Yeah,
but maybe not that same one. Sooner,
sure that
in the
was
last couple of years.
Yeah, I think the last time you played Musica, maybe on your way out to New York. I think it was that time.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, and you had you were clean shaven except for you had these awesome mutton chops, and your hair was just down past your ears, but it was not touching your shoulders yet.
Yeah, that's about right.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've put a lot of effort into it in the years that have passed.
It looks fantastic. Your beard is I have beard envy. It looks fantastic, and you have that beautiful ponytail. Let me see a profile. Let's see that.
Yeah. Too much.
Oh my gosh, that's so awesome.
Nice. All right.
It's so great that you're gaining hair as you progress through time, and I'm just losing it. And man, that's so awesome.
Yeah, I intend to keep this going as long as I can. Take advantage of all the time I might have left.
That's right.
Oh man, hopefully that's a lot.
Yeah.
hair growing time.
Okay, fair enough.
Again, it's just so great to see my friends gaining hair in their age instead of losing it like I did. I try to tell my wife, babe, you don't understand. I had hair down to the middle of my back that was like a rope when it was in a ponytail. It was so thick. And she's like, nah. I'm like, no, I swear to God, it was so awesome. It was the best.
When was that? I don't remember.
Same place here.
Yeah. He's there. And I don't know. Oh, and he's there as well.
Yeah.
I'm
Twinkies
everywhere.
Would that were true. That's
sorry for the delay there.
Oh, no
No,
problem.
no.
We were about to find out when Palmer had hair long enough that it was like.
It was
down the
during
back.
my first marriage. So I was growing it when I met my first wife, and then I cut it off during that marriage. But it was in its like peak. It was like down in the middle of my back. It was so sweet.
I don't remember that. I bet it was though.
Yeah, yeah. Man, it was so great.
In talking about hair, Holly asked yesterday, my wife Holly, saying, do all your friends have to have beards? Is that like a requirement for you to be friends with somebody? And I said, well, I think a little bit, because I have beard envy, because I can do like a little thing here, and that's the end of it. But so yeah, it's true.
Well, we have mullet envy. Let's see this thing.
Yeah, let's see your profile, man.
Okay.
Let's see how the
Right.
mullet's coming.
Oh!
my God!
Yeah.
Oh, yes!
And we still got 2 months.
Oh man!
Less than 2 months. But
Yeah.
That's wicked.
Oh, you know what? That deserves a cheers.
Yeah.
Raise them up. Let's pop these open. On
Okay.
three.
What's everybody got?
Let's see.
Steiner, what are you drinking?
I have a Prost Marzen from out here in Denver.
Oh,
Awesome.
Sounds
what kind of
pretty
beer is
good.
that?
It's Oktoberfest Marzen. So
Hmm.
I'm probably saying that wrong. Don't correct me on the internet if I am.
Oh, yeah, Fenwal.
all the Star Wars nerds are going to come out and correct you on
No,
your
the beer
beer.
nerds. There's nerds for everything now. There's beer
Yeah,
nerds.
they would sound different. We should come up with a voice for them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also have my Oktoberfest beer sweater koozie.
Nice.
Later
That's
hosen to
great.
go with it. So
Very
Where did
good.
that come
going
from?
all out. The internet, surprisingly, of all places.
You're
Find
just like,
everything on there.
I need an Oktoberfest sweater for my beers. Let me find one.
Need is a strong word.
Well, now that I've seen one, oh. I'm just
Twinkie,
drinking
what
a
do you
Miller Lite. What is that's not very exciting. What about Twinkie there?
Oh yeah, so Steiner was kind enough to bring out for me this can, which is it. So right here, it looks like it's bigger than my head, but
It's
it actually is bigger than my head. As I move it back,
Wow.
it's from a local Akron brewery called Shea Brewing. Is that right?
It's our
Shea Brewing. Let's see.
Arche.
It is a chocolate coffee stout,
Oh
Oh,
man,
nice.
and it's like 6 gallons of it.
Yeah.
that's great.
So
You're not going to sleep
We'll
till
see.
Tuesday.
yeah, we'll see how I'm doing by the end of this podcast.
Yeah.
Here anyway, cheers. Here we go.
Cheers.
cheers. I got a red stripe. It's just a red stripe.
Oh, that's great. I literally thought like I was going to clink somehow for a split second in my
Yeah.
brain because I could see you all with your beers raised. Oh man.
One day.
Yeah.
Cheers.
Cheers.
One day.
Oh, man.
Oh, that's good beer.
Yeah.
Mine suddenly tastes worse now that I've seen that Akron beer.
Don't worry, Dave. I'm with you in Team Miller Lite. That's the old standby when I'm not splurging on vacation here. So
Yeah.
but don't feel bad.
I'll try not to. But you're out in Colorado visiting Twinkie here. Tell us about well, shit, I don't know. Actually, we should probably get to know Steiner as a collective here, right?
Yeah.
I think so.
Maybe I guess rather than tell us about your vacation, tell us how you come to be on the show, or in terms of like how you know all of us. I don't know how best to get into that, but
Well, I can start at the beginning, which in this case really is the beginning. Because with Twinkie, I don't actually remember the first time I met Twinkie. His mom and my mom were good friends, and we kind of grew up together. We were probably 2-3 years old when we first started hanging out, and
wow.
we were childhood friends growing up. So Twinkie's always been there from the beginning, which is fantastic. Palmer, I remember meeting in kindergarten,
Yeah.
and a distinct memory of your mom coming to pick you up at my house after a day of playing who knows what. But
Yep.
I remember we were friends all the way back then, even, and
Yeah, all through school.
all through school, up to middle school, high school, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
You know, which is great as well. And Dave, I always remember kind of seeing you around school, and then when I got old enough, or when we got up to high school, I guess, we were on the soccer team together. I remember that's probably the first place we ran into each other.
Yeah, I remember that.
And
What position did you play? I don't remember that though.
I was always on the defense.
Oh, yes.
Always in the back.
As soon as I said it aloud, I'm like, well, no, I remember him back there with me. That's where you want to be. That's where I wanted to be. Because you don't have to run as much. You basically get to tackle people. In my case, jump kick soccer balls. And yeah, that's where you want. I mean, that was the place to be in my estimation. So I remember you there now.
I always felt there was so much less pressure, not having to score the goals, just preventing the other team from scoring.
Yeah.
And I could get the ball and quick pass it to somebody else before I really screwed things up. So,
or like me, just kick it out of bounds. That was my go-to.
Yeah, that's also a valid maneuver.
Yeah, that's why I never played indoor or anything. It's like you can't do any of the things I like to do about soccer. You have to really have fundamentals and all that kind of stuff. I just didn't go for that.
I think as a quick callback.
Jump kicks.
Yeah.
As a quick callback to the first cabin episode, at least the one I was on, I think we had vaguely mentioned that I knew Palmer through Steiner. And I don't know if we used Steiner's name because we were somewhat we were trying to be cautious about who we drug into this this podcast.
I always lead with plausible deniability. You want to maintain plausible deniability.
Yeah. But I met Palmer through Steiner, and of course that.
I mean, arguably Steiner is like the linchpin that led to all of this. I mean, ultimately, like down the line, because that's exactly right. Like the first time I remember really hanging out with Twinkie was actually in the barn that was on the land that the cabin ultimately would be on, but was like years before. Like we were still in 8th grade, and we like stayed overnight in the barn there on that piece of property.
Yeah,
and then that led to like Mystery Science Theater nights, where the three of us were doing that weekly, and that was all pre-cabin too. I mean, those were the two main things that I remember hanging out with Twinkie prior to the cabin, and that was through Steiner.
Yep, that's what I remember.
Whose house was the gathering point for the Mystery Science Theater?
Mine on Sunset. Oh
yeah, yes. Oh, nice.
Yeah.
Do you remember any of which episodes or anything?
Oh man, no. It was all early stuff on the Sci-Fi Channel. So Mike was it was like right around like when there was the Mystery Science Theater movie and.
Right. I remember watching the movie there.
Yeah. And like Mike was the guy. I think that was his name.
Mm-hmm. Mike Nelson.
Yeah.
No Alien from LA. That's my favorite. That's the only one I watched like multiple times.
Yeah. Larry had a huge hard-on for the Mitchell episode, which wasn't even a sci-fi movie. It was like a private detective movie. I don't even know why it was on Mystery Science Theater, but I guess this episode was really good. But he really liked that episode.
Really? That's interesting. I don't remember that one.
What about, isn't Steiner one of the people that built the cabin with his bare hands? Or am I getting ahead of ourselves?
Well, I wouldn't go so far as saying I built it with my bare hands. I was certainly...
Hey, we're trying to build mythology here, Steiner. Come on.
No, you're going to get a hard dose of reality here.
Hey, mythology. We need to say like we were out in the woods and then like angels appeared to us and issued a blueprint, and we just simply by divine directive constructed the cabin. That's how I remember it. I mean, I could be wrong, but
yeah, I'm
Sounds
not
plausible.
Not sure I can let that slide. That's quite a deviation from my memory.
Well, then let's hear the Steiner perspective. Let's hear it from the horse's mouth.
Oh, well, this is probably just as fallible as your recollection, so take this with a grain of salt as well. Yeah, I was part of I guess you could say, the 4 founding members, but I was certainly the least of the 4. I was the youngest. I was just kind of tagging along with these guys. I remember heading out, and we'd go out to the primary founder's farm when we were younger, Twinkie and I. And we'd be out there and help bale hay and ride around in tractors and paint garage roofs and all kinds of stuff. We thought it was fun because we were city kids going out and playing farmer. The farm boys, of course, thought we were crazy for wanting to do something like come out and bale hay. But we hung out and really got to know these guys and went on several adventures before the cabin, one of which involved plastic barrels and wooden pallets lashed together with baling twine in an attempt to float down Chip Creek, which was met with mixed results. But after a while, the guys came up with the idea of putting this cabin in the woods out there. And really the 2 main guys, the 2 farm boys, they really put in the effort and did the design and did a lot of the work themselves, getting it out there. And it was a ton of work. I remember it probably took them a full summer, if not more, to get the cabin up and finished. And Twinkie was out there helping them when he could, and certainly chipped in a lot. And I just I don't even think I had my license at that time, so I wasn't 16 yet, or maybe just about. So whenever I could hitch a ride with Twinkie, I'd be out there and probably supervising more than helping. But
so, no mythology aside, I do bear the scars of the cabin. We put on the roof, which you remember was just tin, right? It was just very thin tin roofing, because every time it rained, it sounded like, the fucking apocalypse or something in there. It was just so
and
loud.
then heaven forbid if there was an actual storm, because I remember being there a couple times when there was legit storms that came through.
Yeah, it'd be like, "Hey, how are you guys doing? I'm doing great. How are you doing?" Just shouting over the sound of rain. But when we finished the roof, I put the last piece on the end and attempted to slide down the roof slowly to get to the bottom of the roof and then just kind of jump off, because it was only 8 feet high or something. It wasn't that high off the ground.
Only
but then
8 feet.
I caught the side of my finger and had put a big gash in it, and I still have the scars of the cabin. I bear the physical scars of the cabin, let alone the mental ones.
he bled for the cabin. Literal blood, sweat, and tears.
I'm sure Steiner did way more work than what he's saying. He's being
I believe he did too.
Yeah, being very coy about his involvement. I don't have specific, recollections of the intent, and certainly the other 2 did a lot of work framing, getting giving the ground level, and getting supplies. But Steiner did a lot of work as well in the work required to get the money to go buy the 2x4s and the flooring and the treated lumber and whatever. We did all do quite a bit of work to get the funds to be able to build that.
Yeah, I think you mentioned that before, Twinkie. It was that painting that garage roof or the barn roof was really
right.
the main endeavor. And I think we did some other odd chores around the farm to try and pitch in and help.
Yep.
In exchange for all that, we got the supplies.
Then farm hands, painting, I bet that barn roof was treacherous.
Yeah.
I don't remember. Were we up on the full barn roof, or was it just the over the the milk house.
There was a couple different sheds. Like the main barn roof, I think, had shingles. Well, I don't know. You know what? I'll try to pull it up on like Google or something while we're talking. But it was just like some like thick paste, that you're like with these big brushes covering the tin so that it didn't rust. It was awful. It was like 1,000,000 degrees and humid, and I mean, just.
It was awful.
You got raw lumber.
Yeah, that's right. We got like $150 worth of 2x4s, which at the time seemed amazing, but in hindsight, maybe I was slightly taken advantage of. No,
just a bit. Just a bit.
Was that barn on the same sort? Was that adjacent to where the cabin was built, or that was someplace else?
No, it was somewhere different. The land where the cabin wasn't actually part of the family farm. There was another arrangement. So the family farm was down the road a ways where we did this work.
And what do you mean when you say you were supervising? Were you like holding the plans and be like, no, do it, this way?
No, I was mostly just standing there watching because those guys knew what they were doing and I sure didn't. And I was just trying to stay out of the way, I think.
Did they have construction experience, or was this whole thing like a catalyst? I mean, or did they basically kind of teach themselves just so they could make this happen?
I think they relied heavily on their experiences as being farm boys, where you get to be pretty handy pretty quick. And they may have did some research and maybe had some other experience doing things, but they were definitely winging it. They kind of had an idea in their heads, but it was done on the fly for sure.
Hey, it came together though. It held up.
Oh, it
still
held up
talking about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
How much older than us generally were those two guys?
So, those two guys were actually the same age as Twinkie.
What?
So, yeah. Despite appearances, they were the same as Twinkie.
My fucking God. That I thought for sure at least one of them was older than me by a few years. That is crazy. That is the oldest 18-year-old I have ever seen. Not in a bad way. Like, he looked like the Marlboro Man. Like,
he did look like the Marlboro Man.
Oh my God.
And Tom Selleck. Like,
yes.
The baby. if the Marlboro Man and Tom Selleck had a baby, that's who he looked like.
And if you watch on our YouTube page, and generally we post them on Twitter around the time of Cabin Kid episodes, what we call the cabin video or the one video, it's basically a montage from this period of time. You can see him. So obviously there's no names involved, and you would have to know him personally to recognize him and put a name to the face. But you could see this magnificent specimen of a cowboy who is evidently a fucking teenager like the rest of us. That truly blows my mind.
Yeah, he was my age, though, a little older. I think, like 6 months older, but in my grade, I guess, is my age range. At least at church, like we were lumped together. We all went to the same church and spent time together there. And so the three of us were in the same. Then Mike would have been 1 year kind of younger. As those things are.
What school system did the builders go to?
They were over in Norwayne.
Okay, Norwayne.
Oh yeah.
So just one town over.
All right, breaking news. I just pulled up Google Earth because it's 2017, and it does appear that all the roofs that we potentially would have been working on are tin, according to satellite images from 2014. So I'm going to say that we did the entire barn because that's a way better story than like three little roofs,
again, Let's take a bunch of 14-year-olds and have them risk their life and limb. And then we're going to pay them in lumber. Oh, man.
Well, this is just standard operating procedure around those parts.
Yeah. No, it was. It was. I totally get it. It's just just painting a picture. Wow.
But to maybe cast a little color on why we wanted to build this cabin in the first place.
Yeah.
That was my question. Thank you. You read my mind, literally.
Yeah.
I remember probably the first time we really went out to hang out with these guys. Well, no, that's not true. Let me back up. Somewhere in the middle of hanging out with these guys, we had the brilliant idea of taking a hay wagon out into the field, into the cow pasture next to the family farm there, and went out and rolled our sleeping bags out on the hay wagon and had a little campfire. And I think that was the first time we had camped out together. And after a time or two of that, we realized, wow, this would be a lot nicer if we had things like a roof and heat and a bit more accommodation.
Ladies.
I think that aspect was overstated. Maybe, well, although Twinkie's motivations are his own, I cannot speak for that.
Yeah.
But speaking for myself and the other two guys, I think a lot of the motivation was the escape and the ability to go out into the woods every Friday and kind of be away from the usual, be away from home and family and parents and all that, and have our own space. Those guys had ideas about being cowboys and whatnot, but they're able to play cowboys the best when we're out in the woods by ourselves.
Right.
So no chicks, man. I just wanted to hear Twinkie say chicks, man.
Let's be honest. I was always way too scared to talk to girls. But again, we're creating some mythology here. You know, we're let's leave the details to be purposely vague.
So, I like this. It's nice to get these other perspectives, especially from. It sounds like Steiner's listened to the podcast. I love it. Now Pumps now Steiner come on. And they're like, no.
Yeah.
Let me set you straight.
I have been looking forward to this for quite some time, ever since I had talked to Steiner about coming out and visiting me 6 months ago, or whenever it was, I kind of forget. And then kind of got delayed and pushed back, and I had schedule stuff and he had schedule stuff. But it's always fantastic to hear things from a perspective that isn't mine. I've forgotten so much. I really have. And I've probably chosen to remember the things that I particularly hold dear, or because I want to view things in a certain way. I think that's a human way of being, is to remember the things we want to remember. And so whether it's Dave sharing his stories, or Palmer talking, or like Steiner sharing the story about the hay wagon thing, totally forgot about that. You know, I didn't remember. I mean, I remember now. It's a clear memory to me. But that has long been overshadowed by any number of other memories that I've probably wanted to recall.
I'm just recalling the list of questions that you sent us to ask Pumps. And I'm almost wondering if it'd be a way of getting at some of this, this, you could contrast the answers to the same questions to another person.
Yeah, I'm up for that. Palmer or Steiner and I have talked, and I've tried to we've had conversations, but we've also tried to been really cognizant of not cheating it, because I would really like to hear when you guys are hearing stories and thoughts that he has and ideas and the way he views this, because I look forward to hearing it and having that conversation in this group, because I find that to be very valuable.
Outstanding. I asked that question without having the questions in front of me.
I just found them.
Oh, bless you. Okay.
Palmer, you
I was on it.
Thebomb.com.
I was on it.
We should go round robin or something. That way, maybe Twinkie, you can elect to ask questions you haven't.
Let me just forward this to.
Yeah, even forward them to Steiner as well, or I can forward it to his number so he has a chance to.
Yeah, because I don't have his number, but I would love it though.
Shoot it to me, and.
So this is going to go back to David Twinkie. I just pasted it back in the same thread.
Okay. Except for 5, I guess, won't make a lot of sense, but.
Okay. Okay.
I don't
I don't
think
know
Steiner-
because he wanted to fight everybody. I think that,
That's true.
that should be a recurring theme. That should be a recurring theme with every cabin kid that we have on. Is that should be the last question we ask them.
All right. Who wants to ask the?
One day, 10
sorry,
years from now, we're gonna finally have him on.
Yeah.
And he's gonna want to fight every one of them bitches, like every one of them.
By then we'll have earned it. Like,
Hell yeah! I would willingly fight him if that meant. Yes, I would willingly fight him.
If that would get him on this podcast and he would actively answer questions in an honest and clear way, I would do whatever he asked me to do.
Yep. Except heroin.
Well, yeah.
Still not fucking
Fucking heroin, really? Like,
he always went there. Did he always go there with you? Like,
yeah, with everybody.
oh man. I'll do anything he asks except fucking heroin.
I don't remember specifically, but I'm sure even like when we were leaving church, like after lunch, he'd like, hey, let's go do some heroin.
No.
Like, dude, you just left church. You can't ask people to do heroin when you're leaving church. There's rules here, buddy.
well, and at the time, I can't imagine it was very readily available to whatever your connections. I mean, nowadays in that area, it probably is, right? That's what I hear. Anyway.
Yeah. I mean, now it would be nothing. Like, you could do heroin anytime you wanted to.
Yeah.
I remember him saying H-bomb. You go H-bomb. So incongruous. So who wants to ask the first question? So I don't know if somehow you've heard this and haven't listened before. Question number 5 is, let's start with that one. Will you fight Bauman if he asks you to? Go.
I will not fight Bauman. And I really don't remember him being so combative while we were out there. Maybe I just wasn't paying attention. I did hear the Pumps episode and the stories of the physical combat out there, but there's definitely we were all pretty chill out there. You know, there wasn't a whole lot of fighting or even roughhousing as far as I remember.
Yeah. Maybe
I was inside while other people were outside. I do remember, who was it? Was it Bauman that jumped on you, Palmer?
Yep. Do you remember that?
Yeah,
do you have that visual in your head too? It's burnt in my brain.
I just barely remember like just the fact that it happened.
And honestly, the closest thing to a physical fight I've ever been in was with Bauman at the cabin, and it was just I just got tired of him asking, and it was like, you know what? Let's do it. Yes, let's do it. Well, and like we went outside and fought, and he jumped off the porch at me, and I flipped him over my back into the wood pile, and
that's what I remember.
Insulted like Jennifer Love Hewitt's head, and he kicked me in the shoulder. He was like trying to pantomime a roundhouse kick, but I leaned into it, and he got me in the shoulder, and we both looked at each other like, "Oh shit, that could have really been bad."
I actually do remember that too, because I mean, I'm never gonna. fucking register a roundhouse kick. I'm like, oh shit,
yeah,
roundhouse is happening. Yeah, I was very excited by that.
Yeah.
That thank you. I had forgotten that in the 20 years.
That was the closest thing to a fight I've ever been in, and that was with Bauman. And I always though I would agree with you 100%. There was not a ton of roughhousing. Like that was like one of maybe. I mean, I remember Pumps and Dan Pumps just always like doing terrible things to Dan.
Really? What? Like what?
Well, there's that picture in the book of like Pumps like has Dano's legs around the flagpole, and he's like ramming his nuts into the flagpole. Like
that's not actually in the book. At least I couldn't find it. I was trying to post that with one of the episodes.
Oh, I thought that was in the book.
Yeah, I can't even visualize that photo.
I'll have to look and see. Maybe that's in one of my books.
Oh yeah, we need to have a sequel to the book. All your photos.
Oh, it is. I think it is in one of my photo albums.
Wait, you have your own book?
I always had a camera with me too through all that stuff. So
we haven't seen nearly as many. Yeah.
Let's talk about this, Palmer.
I'll have to look and see. I mean, I have. It's all in the next room.
Oh my god, it's killing me. You gotta. Yeah. Can you bring it to Des Moines?
And hand it off. You want me to hand it off?
Well, we could make selections.
So you can archive it.
Yes, we can.
This will be
so
protected
easy
forever. Like
it is so easy to make books now.
Be like, Anytime you ever want to see these, make an appointment. Bring your white gloves.
No, we would. But it's so easy to get, like, to make books that have binding and stuff. It's so cheap. I remember when we made our photo book, it involved cutting the prints and a lot of time at Kinko's, and they cost like $100 a piece.
Yeah, I remember it was $90.
Yeah, because it's like $1 a color copy, and nowadays, yeah, it'd be a fraction of that, and it'd look amazing. Oh my god!
Yeah.
We
And
must do
$90
it.
in 1998 is probably like $3,000 now. Would be my guess. So.
Yeah, yeah. But now I finally there's a free digital one. If any cabin kids hear this and lost their book, let me know.
Yeah.
You can hit us up at LWSDpod on Twitter, or just it's LWSDpod@gmail.com.
Yeah. Yep, that works too.
Any listeners, I guess. I don't know, right? Who cares?
Yeah.
There's no names in that thing.
All listeners. All right. Well, let's get back to Steiner.
Yeah.
And let's ask
Please.
Steiner some questions. Should I kick it off here with?
Yeah.
He's
Have
not
at it,
gonna.
buddy.
I guess I'm not gonna kick it off because we have established you will not fight Bauman.
That's right. I will not fight Bauman or anyone else for that matter.
Yeah. I mean, to be fair, if you could see my phone, let's see. It has the little emoji with the smiley. Can you see it? With the sunglasses. It's the sunglasses emoji. So it's asked in jest, for the record. First question. Do you recall how you viewed the cabin while you were actively involved in its use? And so these are my questions. I'd like to take a chance just to like clarify for a second. We talked a little about your motive, and you generally kind of established, I think, from what you had said, it was kind of, as most teenagers want to kind of set out on your own a bit, maybe get some separation between some authority and yourself, all reasonable things. Mike, I guess my question is, did you have any, do you recall having anything other than that? Were there other things that you saw it as, viewed it as a larger than life thing, as we have discussed, or was it just something even outside of that? But do you recall how you viewed the cabin while you're actively involved in its use?
Yeah, so the cabin, as you guys have mentioned before, was always the cabin, capital T, capital C. And that was just like, it was its own entity. And I guess my perspective on it at the time was, hey, this is really cool. I get to go out here. I get to hang out. I'm away from home. You know, I'm out from under parental supervision for a little bit. Look how cool this is. And we get to get these friends together and hang out, which was always fun. And there was kind of two eras to that hanging out at the cabin. It was originally the four founders, and then a small group of friends that were really their friends coming in from the other school district, a little bit older than me. And I think, you know, the first period measured in months, I imagine, of hanging out.
I stayed out there a couple times prior to it being the cabin.
I remember having invited you along, Palmer, and getting you involved in it. But this was before what you guys would refer to as the cabin kids participating in it. And I guess
Pre-contact, I think they call it anthropologically.
and then obviously the cabin kids era, where really it was you guys coming out, and our group of friends has been discussed on this show. And even though that's two kind of different eras, for me it was all kind of just the cabin, because I was going out there and just, like I said, hanging out and being with friends and other people and partying, just not too hard, and just really enjoying it. I guess I viewed it as a thing. You know, I kind of understood it was a significant thing that we had this, and I certainly valued it. But just for what it was for a chance to go out on a Friday, or every Friday night, and hang out.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly understand that perspective. What a lot of the things I think we may talk about on this podcast in reference to the cabin is with, well, now over 20 years, frankly, of perspective in between the cabin being built in 1997 and then us having that time there and then realizing the impact, you know, whether it's Dave talking about how it impacted his kind of musical endeavors going forward, or trying to kind of recreate some of those feelings he had, or Palmer talking about the various circles he's established since then. So I think we've had 20 years of, you know, life to reflect on it. And that's why the question, I'm always curious, if you didn't have the hindsight, and we'll get to the hindsight, you know, I think a little later, but during the time, did it seem special or unique, or was it just another avenue to do what people do? I appreciate your perspective.
Yeah, I remember really thinking it was a cool thing at the time. And I remember asking Palmer, I think several times before we were able to work out the logistics, saying, hey man, you got to come out here. You know, I'd really like you to come hang out with me and these other, at the time, really other 3 guys.
Yeah.
Like, you know, hey, I think you'd really like it. This is a great time. Come on out. And then I remember kind of being excited to introduce it to Palmer specifically. Like, hey, man, this is going to be awesome.
And it really was. I remember those couple times before it was like the Cabin Kid era. It was so intimate, and just like we just like stayed up all night and just like, I remember we talked so much philosophy, which was so awesome.
Well, what we thought was philosophy at the time.
Well, exactly. Yeah. But I mean, as far as like a bunch of 17-year-old eggheads can talk about philosophy, right?
Yeah, from small town Rittman, Ohio.
And then there was the time that this freaked my shit out, was that time that the one founder's cousin's mom showed up, like had been outside listening to us talk for like God knows how long. And then she like came in to get her son and was like, it's time, you should go. We think you should go home with us now. Oh man, that just freaked my shit out. Yeah.
And I remember that night well, and I will gladly share more details off air to protect the innocent.
Oh, sure. No. That's
share as many details as you can without saying names.
Yeah, I want to know.
As much as you I mean, obviously it's up to your comfort level. We're not up to pushing people into sharing things they don't want to share. But just consider that there's like 3 people that listen to the podcast, and then go from there.
Yeah, so I believe it was just probably the 4 founding members, Palmer and this cousin who was Twinkie's cousin.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
When we were
That's right. And he was like, was he older than us?
He was older. He was a couple of years older.
Probably like 4 or 5 years, like substantially for being it was 16 and 17-year-olds, you know, when the person with you is in their early to mid 20s.
And relevant to this story, he was old enough to procure adult beverages.
Right.
And this was
that was like one of the few times that I drank adult beverages out there.
Right. Yeah, exactly. It was one of the few occasions. So we were all out there chilling. As Palmer has said before, using a lot of blue language as part of our normal conversation, and you know, just being guys out there chatting, having I believe it was Old Milwaukee.
Oh yeah,
I recall it was some fantastic variety that he had procured for us. Yeah, we're all sitting there, and it was winter as well, so that's why we were all inside instead of around the fire.
Right.
Cold outs. We're all bundled up inside with the stove going nice and toasty. And there's the door just kind of opens, and there's Twinkie's aunt and his uncle in the background.
Oh.
And that was the fastest to this day. This is the fastest I have ever seen 6 cans of alcohol disappear between people's legs and other sundry hiding places. As soon as that noise hit our ears, everything disappeared. Now, of course, minus the cardboard box still on the old kitchen table right next to the front door.
Right.
But luckily the lighting was such it wasn't apparent that that was there.
Oh man.
And yeah, as was said, he was asked to return home with his parents, and he did. There was no fuss or anything, as I remember.
Yeah, no, he
they went away, and we were all kind of, or at least I certainly was. You know, the adrenaline hit after that passed. I'm like, oh shit, man, did we just get away with that?
Yeah.
The beers come back out. We finish them and kind of carried on with our night after the initial shock. And at least I kind of expected to hear more about it on account of all the connections involved with family and whatnot. But Twinkie, correct me if I'm wrong, I don't remember really any blowback coming on us. At least none came back to me.
No, I remember getting in trouble for a variety of things, but I don't involving the cabin. But I don't recall that being an issue.
What did you get in trouble for? Like,
so
you were like you were like just such a well-behaved like gentleman of a kid.
Yeah, well, I don't know if you remember this, but we had planned to do kind of like I don't know if it was like a fall party or like a Halloween party or something, and we put like torches up the path.
Yeah.
Not to be confused with the white supremacists using similar torches.
Oh Lord!
We did
Actually,
not do that.
I thought you were going to mention the time when we had the cabin concert, because that's one of my most vivid memories of that evening was how the path was lit with those torches, like the tiki torches you stuck in the ground. Yeah. Oh man, the other thing didn't even occur to me. So sorry.
Yeah, and so we had done that, and then at some point there was either there were people who were planning it without telling me, which could have certainly been the case, or just rumors had gotten started that there was going to be alcohol up there out at that party, and my mom got called up to the high school. Now I don't know if it was through like the guidance counselor or who exactly found out. It had been a member of our church was the guidance counselor at the time, and so there must have been some connection there. And I remember getting called out of class, and my mom is like in the cafeteria / rec room / theater area there in the old high school, like crying, and that I was planning some sort of like orgy at the cabin. And I certainly wasn't without my attempts at some levels of skullduggery, but it certainly I wasn't like dumb enough to be advertising like a kegger at the cabin for Halloween. I have my moments of stupidity, but I like to think that I knew enough to avoid that. But yeah, so I did get like there was issues, but I don't remember any blowback from that. No trouble that I'm aware of came from it, which they're probably more concerned about whatever my cousin, who frankly over the last 20 years hasn't really improved his life. And so shame. Yeah, they were probably more concerned about them at the time than us. And maybe we were able to stash the cans and get away with it. Or maybe they just were so focused on getting him and getting out that the rest of it was, whatever. Or maybe they told me, I just blamed it on Palmer. Who knows?
Listen, I was the heathen. So that is totally understandable. I mean, honestly, why have a heathen in your group, right?
Yeah, you're gonna carry the load, man.
Right. No,
that leads into one of the not sequentially of the questions, but I'll ask one based on that.
Yeah.
For Steiner, of course. Did the cabin help shape any political, social, or religious views for you?
In a word, no. But I don't mean that to belittle it by any stretch, because the discussions we had out there were very, very interesting and enjoyable. I remember the philosophical discussions Palmer was talking about among the small group of us in sort of the pre-Cabin Kids era. And I remember we would get into what we thought at the time was quite deep. We were tooling around with like epistemology and morality and some other high philosophy kind of stuff. But I distinctly remember discussing religion at one point. And by then I had kind of already made up my mind and espoused, as I recall it, kind of a hard atheism, which was a shock to some of the other guys because we were all raised in the church, or at least I think it was a shock. And we had a good discussion about that. So I don't know. I don't know if any of the interactions really changed me after that. And I do feel bad kind of saying that. Those are teenage years. Those are supposed to be the most formative years. So I don't want to.
Oh no, you shouldn't
come off as if I was, perfect in my opinions and have been rock solid ever since. But I guess I kind of remember going in as here's what I think, and I'm gonna spout it at will because we're in this setting, and you guys get to listen.
Yeah, so let me follow up with that real quick then, or not real quick. We don't do anything quick here, but purposefully so. Palmer and Dave, I love you guys for this, by the way.
We love you
Thank
too,
you so
buddy.
much for doing the work to put this together. It really warms me to be able to have these conversations.
Love you too, buddy.
We talked a little bit, I remember, Steiner, from some of the podcasts about having a space at which you could at least talk about things that maybe you weren't comfortable talking about. The concept of a safe space is derided quite a bit nowadays in certain circles, and the idea of it is somewhat ridiculous. But did it feel more comfortable? Did you feel the opportunity at least that you could talk about some of those things or share your opinions because of that kind of space that was created, or was it more just about the people you were around, or would that none of that would have mattered and you would have been pretty okay talking about it no matter what?
No, it would have definitely been the people. I wouldn't then, and probably now, I wouldn't have been one to open up on those kinds of just topics just freely. The fact that it was really my good buddies, my best friends that were all out there at the time, that certainly makes it easier to get into that kind of talk. In that setting, being away from parents, like we didn't have to worry about being eavesdropped on, Twinkie's aunt and uncle accepted.
Yeah,
I actually wouldn't be surprised if we had been spied upon at other times. But that was a place where we could speak freely and not really worry about it. Any of our other settings, at home or at school, or not that we'd ever discuss these things at church, but in the common gathering points, there's always the chance of being overheard or having somebody else be present. But out at the cabin, we were really free to speak our minds, which is a really valuable thing.
Awesome. When you think of the cabin now, like what do you think of? Like what kind of feelings do you get, or are there any memories that you have from the cabin that keep coming up, that you keep coming back to when it pops up into your head, or anything like that?
So one of the things is having that standing Friday date, that, hey, we know where everybody's going to be. We're all going to be out at the cabin. I don't need to talk to anybody. I can just roll on out there whenever I feel like it, early, late, in between. And I know that my friends will be there and I'll have a good Friday evening hanging out with them. And it was really just that kind of a cohesion or the real social focus, I guess, of that time. And you guys have talked before about, do other people have their cabins? And to me, that's kind of what that means is, did you have that ability to, on the regular, really get to hang out with friends and have a shared space where you could really enjoy each other's company?
Yeah. That's awesome. It definitely, I know what you mean, because it took that like pressure of, I feel like, you know, when I was teaching, watching kids, like there's a lot of that social pressure of like, I feel like I should be doing something, because it is like kids are conscious of the fact that they are in this like time period of social interactions, you know, where that's like that's really all they have to do. Right. And it kind of was this like pressure release valve to know that was always there. Like you never had to worry about where your next social interaction was going to come. That was a free space away from your parents and all that crap.
Yeah, the thing that just kind of came to me, the feeling of being out at the cabin is really a lot the same as walking into my regular bar on a Friday night. Being able to go in and just not call anybody, not see if anybody was going to be around, just walk in and know that around that bar I'm going to see, you know, half a dozen people I know, and be able to have a conversation and have a social interaction in that setting without really worrying about it. And the cabin was that for us as kids.
That's awesome.
Do you have a regular bar like that? I'm so jealous.
I sure did. I worked very hard at establishing my regular ship by consuming mini Miller Lites. And that's another story, I guess.
Oh, please do tell. I am so interested in that. Like that. I mean, I understand that idea. Obviously, you see that idea perpetuated for decades and decades of American films. And for one period of my life, live within walking distance of a bunch of different bars. I just never did that. I definitely see the correlation between the sort of regularity of the cabin. So I don't know, just that would be a very interesting thing for me to know about. How one works hard to establish their regularity and then enjoys the fruits of that labor.
And that, as Palmer has said before, that was really another cabin for me, with that group of friends and in that setting, in that place. And we can get back to that topic, I'm sure, as we go along here.
I'm writing it down. I gotta know.
But to spoil the whole thing, that era also ended, just like the cabin era ended when the owners decided to shut down the place about 2 years ago.
Son of a bitch!
So it's just kind of a history repeating itself, if you will.
Did it happen the same way? Like you just went in like everything was normal, and then they just like looked at you and were like, "Hey, by the way, tonight's the last night that we're doing this."
No, there was a long decline.
All right.
And we did have the chance, at least in this instance, to have the final evening for those interested to kind of close it out with style.
Good deal. Good deal. Were there any specific like events at the cabin that I know we touched on, like we've talked about the cabin concert before, and we've talked about the pre-cabin kid days a little bit. Were there any other events that stick out in your mind when you think about the cabin?
A short one that certainly probably isn't what you're looking for.
Oh no, I'm not fishing. I'm just curious.
That sounds even better. That perks my ears right up when he's like, "You're not gonna like this."
A bad job of setting expectations here. Yeah, not that exciting. I remember after the closing of the cabin, Twinkie and I went back there to kind of clean up a little bit and reclaim some belongings. And I believe it had probably sat unused for a few weeks, maybe a month or two. And so we went back and started going through things. And in the cabin, there was the loft upstairs. There's, the main downstairs with the wood stove and the couch and some chairs and the kitchen table. And then there was a ladder on the back wall to go upstairs to the loft where there's room for who knows how many sleeping bags to roll out.
Yeah.
That many right there.
Yeah.
So we crawled up there, and there's a big pile of blankets, and we're just all right, well, let's get to work. And one of us, maybe me, I don't remember exactly, grabbed this pile of blankets and kind of flung it, see what was underneath. And all of these black and white specks just scatter over everything, and then they start moving.
Oh.
And
what?
I think Twinkie got the worst of it. Correct me if I'm wrong here, but as we whipped that open, there was a giant ant's nest. A bunch of ants had got in there. And just set up camp among all these blankets. And we, of course, being kids, freaked a little bit.
Hell yeah, I'd freak right now if that happened to me.
Ran downstairs and considered our options. I believe torching the entire place was one of the primary options.
Burning it to the ground. Yes, that was
your move, ants.
Yeah.
But after a bit more consideration, I think we finally settled upon, donning hazmat suits or something and pulling those blankets down. And I believe we pitched all that on a fire outside. But that was certainly the kind of thing that stuck with me afterwards. It's just that shock of there's a lot of salt and pepper in here. Oh no, that's not what that is at all.
That's terrifying.
But there are other memories. Another thing I remember that was probably in the pre-cabin kids era was there was a fella that rented the house there at the farm on the cabin. So as you guys remember, the cabin was back in the woods in this cow pasture, and there was a full, if old and fairly dilapidated farmstead right there.
Yep.
With a large barn and a corn crib that was, over time at our cabin, the corn crib went from standing to completely on the ground. But there was a farmhouse there, and a fella who rented it. And one evening we went out kind of early. The sun was up in the summer. And this fella was out grilling, and three or four of us founders were out there, and we talked to him, and he says, "Hey, come on over," and got some food on. And he gave us these burgers, which were black bear, venison, and bison with maybe just a little bit of beef in it. Whoa. And to this day, that was just about the best burger I've ever had. It had awesome. So much flavor, and it was juicy. It was great that this guy hooked us up with it. And then after that, he said, "Oh, I'm going to light the fire." I'm like, okay, because we had seen him do this before. So we start walking up the cabin along the edge of the woods. And as we got down a little ways, we heard the usual boom, and see the mushroom cloud rise above the trees of who knows how many gallons of gasoline he had dumped on the pile to get it started.
That's awesome. Whoa. I can't believe that you guys actually interacted with that guy. That guy was always like kind of a myth to me. Like,
yeah, and
like I knew he was there, but never saw him.
Yeah, in the cabin kids era, I don't remember if he was even there. Certainly in the early days he was. And somehow he did not complain or raise a stink about the amount of traffic that was going back there some nights.
Oh, yeah.
Which kind of makes me think he may not have been around. He may still have been living there, but he definitely wasn't around on Friday nights. He probably had his own social engagements to attend to.
Yeah.
What was that guy's name? Was it Dave?
I believe it was Dave. That sounds right.
Dave, I can't remember his last name now, but
no,
yeah.
I couldn't tell you.
Surprised I actually remember his first name.
I remember going out there another time, and he had a target deer, one of those styrofoam model deers, about 200 yards up the driveway, because the drive back to, of course, the drive back to the farm was quite a long ways. And so we see the deer out in the cornfield in front of the house, and we get back, and he had his rifle all screwed into the holder and was sighting in his rifle out there because he was a pretty big hunter. It's like, well, thank you for not shooting at us as we came in, but show us how it works now. How close is it?
It's the beer buffalo bear. What did I say? The bear buffalo bison
Goat
burger. Goat
No, I
burger.
don't think there was goat in it.
Who knows what all was in that thing, but it was tasty.
Yeah. I was thinking of Goat Boy, like the Goat Boy.
Yeah.
Well, that made me think too how, for some reason, back in those days, that was a nickname of Logan's, like something about goat. Do you guys remember that vaguely?
I do remember that. What was that even from?
I don't know.
I imagine somehow maybe his family raised goats at their house.
Yes,
Oh.
yes.
So, like, take to the fair and stuff. You're
Yeah.
right.
That's right.
I don't remember if it probably wasn't Logan. It's probably his younger brother. I think they even had a little sister that maybe it was hers.
Yeah, because in the Steve commentary, so Logan, for listeners who aren't part of this group, I was Logan's another cabin kid, and he and I were in a band together called Steve, and we made a documentary. And on the commentary for said documentary, there's a point where Logan is just hammered, like he got really drunk and threw up. I put together this film of us, like from I think era 2000, just shortly after the cabin days. And so we're all watching it together. There's 5 of us, and I think Larry, who we also speak about in the cabin, was moderating, and then Moto, my brother, who's a sort of sound wizard, was running the controls, and Logan was just getting hammered, and because he was about to start a new career and like a kind of an intense one. And so he felt, I think, in some ways like this was a bit of a last hurrah, at least with this group of guys. And at some point, he's just like, there's video of it too. We had a camera in the corner. He's just kind of like, I think he falls over on Jacko's shoulder, and he was just like barely there. And he just proclaimed out of nowhere, "I raise goats."
Oh, Logan.
So it was amazing. Like, we don't know the internal monologue that got him there, but now we perhaps have a little bit more insight into more from what Steiner shared. But I want to throw that in there, why his nickname back in the day might have something to do with goats.
Until he comes on the podcast and explains clearly why he got
wouldn't
the
that
name
be something?
Goat Boy.
Yeah.
That's happening.
Please, Logan, come on.
You've been summoned, Logan.
Yeah, come on,
Yes.
Logan.
If you say his name more than 3 times,
That's
maybe
right. We summon him 3 times, and that's it.
Yep.
It's funny. I was on this back porch one time with another cabin kid, I think Crams, and we were talking like this, but not being recorded. Somehow or other, out of the blue, Logan like calls my phone through Facebook Messenger. I didn't even know this was possible. And he's sitting in his like, he was at work basically, and he had a moment to call us, and like we saw him. so I think there's something to that. I don't know. Logan, if you're listening somehow live on YouTube right now, we'll send you a link. All
If
you
you're
need
one
is
of
like
our
iPhone
0 viewers,
headset.
Logan.
Motherfucker. All right. Well, let's get back to these. I know we've touched on a lot of these questions organically, but I'm looking at one here. Steiner, what kind of effects do your experiences at the cabin have on you as you have continued on your own path?
I'm sure it was formative, having all those friends around. But I don't know if I could tease out, any concrete effect it would have had. And that may be part of, let's say, the path I went down immediately following the Cabin Kids era. which was certainly a different thing. Yeah, that's a tough question. I don't know if I can answer it, at least framed like that. Maybe as we continue on, we'll hit upon something.
Okay.
Yeah. Fair enough. I think those are the actual scripted questions.
Oh wait, no. Do you find it easier to reconnect with cabin kids after a period of time? Like, we touched on it pretty early on in these episodes of this show, just how, like, you know, Dave and I went like 5 years without talking, and then picked right back up. Do you find that that's the case with other cabin kids?
I imagine it to be. As we said earlier, it's been a couple years since I talked to Dave and Palmer. It's been damn near 10 years since we've chatted.
Yeah. Jesus.
And I hope that we're having a nice, smooth conversation here.
Absolutely.
Hopefully that's coming through to everybody. But Twinkie and I have actually talked about this in the past, about how we can go 6-12 months, you know, without saying anything, without sending a message or anything. But when we do reconnect, it's just back to the races. You know, we're able to pick right up and go kind of like we used to.
Yeah.
But I wonder if that's a special case, because, you know, you were guys who I've kept in touch with, and to greater or lesser degrees, and guys who have had strong relationships when we were younger. I don't know if I ran into some of the other cabin kids, if that would be the same. I imagine we'd have plenty to talk about, and I imagine we'd get along, but I kind of wonder if, or I expect that the relationships we formed back then as individuals was more important than the group dynamic, or at least it certainly was for me.
Okay, that's fair. Good answer.
As someone who,
so awesome to get it. So
ahead,
you guys are so right. Like, to get like the different perspectives and insights, like angles on some of this stuff. I love doing these cabin kid like discussions.
Well, I remember, I mean, I, for one, I know I've talked about it on this podcast before and stuff. I think I was aware at the time of you remember, Palmer, you were saying earlier about kids knowing that they should be socializing because they were young, etc.
Right.
And I didn't do much of that. I was then still engaged in a lot of the same thing I am now, which is like making these like projects, which may or may not be, you know, worthwhile use of my time, but nonetheless are very preoccupying. And so to have a social outlet and then to have it be this kind of special one like we're talking about, I was very hyper aware of that at the time, and valued it quite a bit, and made a point of like making documentaries about it even then. so I was aware of that to a very high degree. But it's interesting, of course, then to have this other perspective of people who had different, you know, experiences of the same events and stuff. But I can remember even then that Steiner, you're here, more of an objective kind of view of things. We heard from Pumps in his Cabin Kids episode how he was very aware of us as kind of outsiders coming in, taking over this space. And then I think I'm sure I've talked at some point about when we were making this photographic archive of like, so a bunch of cabin kids, Jacko, Crams, Palmer, everybody. I was taking video, these guys were taking photos, and before everybody sort of diverged their paths into how often happens when you're in your late teens, early 20s, we kind of got together, you know, the day after the cabin concert that was like the last time we could all sort of be there, and started to compile this physical book that we made at like Kinko's of photographs and stuff. And so I have this specific memory of, and I think there's some video of it of Steiner there. And he was, you know, he's part of the group, certainly. We're all friends and stuff, but I think you were a little like kind of caught off guard or able to like cognize, is that a word? I'm making it a word. Cognize in the moment that it's a bit odd, right? Or a bit kind of conceited or whatever. Things I can easily see now, but didn't see then. So I don't know. That's a big long wind up for I don't know what. But I guess I'm just wondering, as one of the people that were there supervising, one of the founding four, all of that, what your views were on this. You referred to it too as like these kind of two different eras. That what sort of became of the ritual? What, you know, the word group has been thrown about. That's also at the time was kind of capitalized by some people, like capital T, capital G, the group. People were graduating, inviting the group to parties. Anyhow, so I don't know, say on that what you're willing to explore.
Yeah, I guess my perspective of the dynamic was that, you know, I was in the younger class. Palmer and I were a year behind the main cohort of the group. And I, you know, in Rittman, being the size it is, we knew everybody. You know everybody by name and you know who they are, but you don't necessarily hang out. And so there was always for me, especially at the beginning, a bit of an outsider dynamic, where there was this group of people who appeared to me at least to already be a cohesive group of friends coming in. And we, I guess that always kind of persisted for me. Like I felt that there was the main cohort and I was just kind of tagging along. And I don't mean that negatively. It's not like I wasn't accepted by any stretch or that I didn't participate in anything by any stretch. But from my perspective, it was always kind of on the outside. And maybe that's part of my perspective here, that the pre and post era and the reliance upon the personal relationships as individuals. I feel like I kind of rambled there, but hopefully
it's the most concise answer I've never given such a short answer, so that doesn't count. I feel like you haven't even answered it, but all right.
The question was literally longer than that answer.
Oh my God, the question was 25 minutes. I don't even know what I asked, but I wasn't the answer. It's especially interesting to me as someone who does talk a lot and basically thinks aloud. So I'm always wondering what's going on in the minds of people who are able to keep their mouths shut. And there he is.
That was the best answer, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there was always certainly and I imagine this was probably true in the wider community, you know, of the school and of the general populace there, I guess, that we definitely were a group. You know, we were a group of friends, probably among many that existed in the school, and that we were the ones that did this thing, that we were the ones that went out to this cabin and eventually, you know, ended up hanging out quite a bit there. So I think there definitely was an idea of a group to it.
Remember Pumps was, no, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Twinkie.
Well, I was just going to say, you know, and I don't want to fast forward through Dave's question. So Dave, in the timeline of this question, yours makes more sense. Let's go with yours first. But within the concept of a group, I think comes the notion, or at least in our case, the reality that groups disband, much like your bar. You know, that era ended, and you know, you're kind of sent out looking for something different, hopefully with a set of experiences behind you, or positive and negative, but experiences that guide that process a little bit, you know, or are somewhat formative. But I'd be curious to hear your thoughts on why the cabin, beyond the technicalities, you know, we all went off to college, blah, 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 blah. I know that happened, but Was there anything else about the cabin? Would the cabin have ended anyway? Were there other things about it that would have had it kind of fade away?
So a trite answer is that all things change, and that yes, it would have eventually faded away. Longer answer is one longer answer is that I think in the head founder's mind, this was going to be a finite thing, and despite the actual sequence of events or factors that led to its closing, I think it would have ended in probably the same time frame. Maybe it lasted that final summer of what would have been 99, say, but I couldn't, looking back on it, I don't think it would have continued on after that, regardless of circumstance. As it turned out, in the actuality of things, it wasn't at all surprising, and as you guys have said before, even that the group, the Cabin Kids group, really would be the villains in the story of the two other founders who are not present here.
100%.
Yeah, and that's really by no one. I don't want to assign blame per se, but that's just how it turned out.
Yeah,
and that's the second founder definitely. He kind of just gave up on it on his own volition well before the official end.
Yeah,
and so I hope that answered your question, Twinkie.
No,
it would have ended in that time frame anyways, just based on the lead founder's position and how things were going for him. I think he would have moved on, and as he was really the linchpin, he was the access to the physical location, that it would have came to pass at some point or another that it would have ended.
Yeah, and I I tried to be somewhat vague purposely, of course, but I think that in my mind, obviously when you have someone you're building, you're going to this thing, it's on somebody else's land, you can only do it as long as the person is interested in letting you get on their property. So there's certainly this
right
logistical and physical limitation that's in place. But for Dave and for Palmer, it's probably kind of hard to imagine how foreign their ideas and their the music they brought and the viewpoints they brought and kind of the culture that they brought to the cabin, when you reference that and you put it in parallel with the restrictive and very conservative is honestly too light of a word, way that these two guys would have been raised. And so I certainly think that they didn't quite view it as changing as rapidly as it did. It wasn't that they didn't want other people to enjoy it. I just don't know if they necessarily understood the rapid changes that it would take place, or that people would end up running naked through their pastures, or that weekly excursions to the sawing or sand and gravel pit would happen, or those types of things, which would be very
15 cars parked in the barn driveway,
Pearl Jam was something that was so foreign to any of those people, it was beyond reach. You know what I mean? It's very common and well known to virtually everyone else, or even Steiner and I would have been very comfortable with or known Pearl Jam, but to them it was just completely foreign.
And I think this goes back to the purpose of the cabin, or our intentions when we build it. And for those two guys, I really believe that escape and having their own space was really the driver.
Sure.
And, you know, yeah, it'd be cool to have chicks out there. You know, I don't think we would have objected to that.
Chicks, man.
Thank you.
But it really was their sanctuary and their place. And when that started to change, you know, that was, I think it was rough on them, because it wasn't what they wanted. It wasn't their place anymore. It had become, it sort of now belonged to a wider group in a sense, or at least the atmosphere had been taken over. The environment had been changed.
It's like a Frankenstein story, Dave.
Thank you. Yeah.
They had made a monster.
Yeah, that they couldn't control.
Yeah, and they were certainly on board with inviting folks out. You know, as I said, in the pre-cabin kids era, you know, they were inviting their friends out, and there was a small group of regulars, a pair of brothers I remember in particular, who used to like to come out and have their case of Busch Light and talk about being sober as a turtle, if I recall the phrase correctly. But
man, I just don't remember that at all.
I'm vaguely remembering that. I'm trying to bring it back.
But so the two founders really did want to have, you know, a good time and invite people out, and it just kind of got away from them, you know, I guess, as things would, you know, as you can see parallels in, you know, internet communities at a much larger scale, where you have that tight-knit group of people who are in on the ground floor and things are really great, and you want to share it with people, and the people that come in, you're having a good time, and then the next thing you know, the word is out and a bunch of people come in, and you realize that what you created is different now.
Yeah.
And has changed.
It's like, of course, like the hindsight of age, you like, there's half of my brain that is like, I wish I would have been more cognizant and sensitive to that back then. But then the other half of my, like the selfish half of my brain is like, but would you have had the same experience and gotten what you got out of it if it would have been anything less than what it was? You know? I would though, given the opportunity, I think I would have done what I could have in my part to have incorporated those other two founders, like, more in those things. I will not say, just to extend like the life of the cabin, just it really, really, really bothers me knowing what I got from the cabin, that there were at least two people that had, if anything, the complete and utter opposite effect on them.
Palmer, if I can, well, attempt to speak to it. I don't think it's coincidence that the other two people we're referring to are members of the church that Steiner and I, and of course the other two, grew up in.
Yeah.
In the sense that they embraced some ideals and some viewpoints that the four of us probably do not embrace.
Yeah.
And I think that their worldviews, whether they just weren't at a point where they were interested in changing, or they didn't care about changing, or they didn't want to change, or it just, the other pieces of their life outside of this cabin, you know, the other 6.5 days a week or whatever it was, certainly held more impact. I would just, while I understand, you know, sir, I don't think it was anybody's intent to monopolize anything. I remember there were some conflicts. There were some conflicts in usage, and there was some disagreements about how the space should be used, and especially
how might their viewpoints be different though if they would have had a similar experience with the cabin that we had. You know what I mean? Like that's part of my regret is like,
sure, having a more inclusive outlook and trying to welcome them in. I just think that it would have been challenging because you wouldn't have had the same experience that you had. You wouldn't be sitting around the campfire or running naked through the pastures or whatever, you know, all the kind of experiences that are kind of silly but do represent a certain sense of safety and confidence in each other. I think those experiences would have been different simply because I don't think they would have had that level of connection with you or with Dave or with even myself, you know. But
Twinkie, I would maybe disagree a little bit that their upbringing had as much impact in this particular situation as you're saying. To me, just the group dynamic itself kind of explains it. Like I'm thinking of a hypothetical universe, part of Palmer's multiverse of all things.
oh,
But imagine a group of, to greatly oversimplify, a group of, you know, TV and music nerd or TV and movie nerds who had, you know, a garage at their parents' house where they always went out and watched movies every Friday night and then listened to their music and their, you know, their Pearl Jam and their U2 and whatnot, and had their own little group. And it was a really cool place away from their parents and their own space to do their own thing. And then as time went on, they invited in more people, and eventually through connections, this group of rednecks and cowboys came in wearing their tight Justin jeans and their ball caps and their flannel shirts. And whenever that group came in, they came in and started playing country music and dancing around and yelling yeehaw. You know, that if you can put yourself in that position, that's essentially what happened. Was just another culture came in that, not so much the religious aspect, it's just, hey, this isn't my bag, you know. They kind of just got taken over by another group, I guess.
Yeah, that's exactly how I always thought it was. Yeah, well, yeah. No, I didn't realize that then, but right. But once I was old enough or had enough distance later, that's about as perfectly as it could be put from my perspective as well. Being one of those YouTube Pearl Jam fans that came in.
Yeah, and I don't think to you know, they realize quite, like, for example, with me, who they may not necessarily realize who they were. Well, to use one of their phrases, probably. The kind of cart they were hitching their horse to, in the sense that, you know, I probably was going through some transformative parts of my life. Wasn't necessarily just ready to settle down with the same old, and, you know, had a variety of different friends and was good with all of that stuff, you know, kind of interested in seeing how people were and enjoying that spontaneity that I felt and some of those things. So, you know, we all had our viewpoints for what we wanted to have done. And as Steiner's indicating, we just kind of won by numbers, not by, you know, intent. But
so I actually have it's not exactly a follow-up, but where the conversation kind of was going was something I was trying to get at earlier, which I still don't have the greatest way of asking about. But I guess I was kind of curious. I'm interested to know more from a different perspective of the non-YouTube Pearl Jam camp, or someone that knew both certainly better than I did. What that... I don't know. Were you aware of that at the time? Like Palms, did you see that happening with that kind of outsider's perspective and kind of hesitant, like, because you were, it feels to me like you were part of both camps. You were saying pre-cabin kids and post or whatever. You certainly count yourself among both, right?
Yeah, I definitely, you know, floated between the two and was participatory in both groups. Um, I don't know if I was cognizant of it at the time, as you know, we've probably overcharacterized it as a takeover here tonight, but I wasn't cognizant of it as a takeover at the time. When the end came, when the lead founder kind of said, "Enough is enough, no more," and shut it down, it didn't come as a surprise, I guess. I understood his reasons, and at that time I was able to see it, but I don't think I knew at the time. And well, I was probably a fairly naive and oblivious kid a lot of the times back then anyways, so my perspective may not have been the best in terms of the group dynamic there.
It didn't seem like that to me. Like, okay, well, what about, do you remember the book thing that I'm talking about? I mean, just in terms of like a contrast to a oblivious kid. Like, I feel like that's not how I would have described you. I would have described you as a much more introspective and observant and intelligent person than you're giving yourself credit for. But like, so that we're making this book, the room full of kids, like basically building a monument to their youth, and you're sitting there thinking, already able to be aware, like this is kind of bullshit. Like,
yeah. So I wanted to ask you about that because I didn't remember that situation at all, honestly, and I kind of feel bad about it. But so you described a person sitting in the corner kind of writing and saying, "Hey, this is all egomaniacal,
yeah, Palmer,
maniacal
sorry,
bullshit."
not Palmer. Bauman couldn't say egomaniacal.
Yeah,
called what egomaniac?
I think Cramps had to tell him how to pronounce it. Could you just picture Cramps being like egomaniacal?
Hey guys, it's egomaniacal, guys.
Yeah. I'm gonna tweet the clip. You'll be able to see yourself, Steiner, writing. And I think we don't talk about it in the documentary, like what you wrote, but it actually spurred a discussion that very succinctly Bauman says, like, here's how we got to this point of being a group that could be criticized. It was kind of an interesting springboard. But anyway,
was that at the hotel as you were describing, or was that?
Yeah, it was at the in Fairlawn.
I really do not recall that. Like, I'm trying to piece it together, and I do not remember being there. I do not remember participating to the level you describe, or any of it, which is kind of.
Well, you didn't speak up or anything. You were just sitting quietly, and on your way out, I think I asked about what you wrote, if we could include it, not thinking it would be something critical. But even then, like, I wasn't bothered by it. I was like, oh, that makes sense. but
well, now that you say it like that, I totally get it.
Like, well, yeah.
Yes, that is exactly who we are. Like, yes.
I guess I'm more wondering about, like the feelings that might have led you to write that at the time.
I guess I can stand behind that sentiment, and to be brutally honest about things, I can still kind of see that as we go forward today. We're here recording us talking about our glory days, which is great for us. I'm glad we get to reminisce and go over it, but there's still a bit of ego behind. Hey, let's put this out into the world. Let's broadcast this and have other people see it. Or maybe that's just my perspective. And
that is a running theme on this podcast. Is that we are in a vicious cycle of self-documentation and ego inflation. That is just what we do.
And I'm acutely aware of I am here voluntarily speaking with you about this. So
right, yeah.
Yeah, I guess for me, while I will agree with the sentiment that it is us talking about days gone by, I'm more intrigued, almost like paleontologically, where I'm kind of like, where has the past influenced me now? How has it affected me? And in what way can I like harness that positivity from it, the good stuff, going forward. You know, we're all rapidly approaching 40, which pushes squarely at like halfway done, frankly.
Speak
Yeah.
for yourself, old man.
But, you know, I think I've said before, you know, where I've tried to influence the things around me for the good as much as I can. Like I fuck shit up all the time, which if we talk about Blade Runner, we'll talk about that. But
we're going to talk about Blade Runner. Yeah. Actually, you guys are, and I'm going to step out because I haven't seen it yet. But there's twice I missed it. But
I haven't seen it yet either.
Happen.
I didn't get a chance to see it yet.
Nor have I, so we better not talk about
Shit.
it.
Well, I'm going to at least give some high level stuff, which we'll talk about just humanity in general, or what the concept of what being human is. But all of that being said, just, you know, it's not like let's see how to build this up. So you know, looking back at high school or college, I don't necessarily view as like where it all ended for me. I just want to understand why I look at that as something that influenced me in such a large way so that I can go forward and do that. I think I've mentioned like in some small way trying to influence that at work or in my small community, or trying to do like Twitch streaming for video games in some way, being a somewhat positive person on the internet, which is semi-rare these days. And yeah, it takes a little bit of an ego to be a creator, right? Because you have to believe that there is someone out there who wants to consume what you're doing.
Yeah.
You have to believe that what you're creating,
even
is
if it's
good
just your friends who do it because they love you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But I like to believe that it serves a purpose other than that. And it hopefully still 10, 20 years down the line, there's, so, you know, somebody, it's not like, you know, the song, it's a really popular song. Is it Mellencamp, The Summer of '69? How am I doing on that?
No, that's Bryan Adams.
Sorry, Bryan Adams. Yeah, Mellencamp Adams, whatever. 80s.
No.
Am I right?
No, you're not right. That is world apart. One's Canadian, one's American, one's fucking awesome, one's not. I'm not a fan.
But when you listen to the song "The Summer of '69," it's immensely sad.
Yeah,
it is an absolutely terrifying song. Those people peaked. That was it. It was over then, right? There was going to be a band, and now there isn't a band, and
you know,
it's like there's nothing else to look forward to. And I don't view that as the case. I view that as a cabin as an experience that influences me and recognizes that if I am authentic in some way to the people around me, that's what my therapist tells me to use the word authentic, that if I'm authentic with the people around me, I can have those experiences because people feel that. And they know when you're bullshitting them, even if they don't necessarily know it at the time, they understand if you're not being authentic. And so there's this sense of authenticity that I feel from the cabin that I want to push forward in my life, that I want to surround myself with. So
I love it. Yeah. Well, as the chief perpetrator of the perpetuation of like the media and putting oneself out.
Oh, I thought you were going to say the hostile takeover of the cabin. We were going to, when this is
no.
a movie, you're going to be the primary. You're going to, you know what? I got it.
Might have been one of the loudest.
In The Fifth Element, you're going to be Gary Oldman.
Oh, always be Gary Oldman. That's not a bad thing.
Yeah, you're going to be Gary Oldman in The Fifth Element when we make the cabin movie from the perspective of the other two founders.
I can't wait for the costumes, for the overacting. Like, it's going to be amazing.
The flashing red button. He would have asked me what that flashing red light was at the moment.
Anyway, sorry.
A true killer.
I haven't seen that movie in way too long. I haven't seen that movie since it came out. I was not as enamored of it as some. As
I just remember Corey saying he watched it every day for like 40 days.
You know what? Here's the thing. It does have some CGI issues, as most movies from the 90s do, but it actually does hold up surprisingly well with some of the humor and the costumes, some of the like set design and stuff.
Surprising amount of practical effects in that movie.
Yeah, Bassan did a pretty good job.
Yeah, I mean, like the whole the luxury yacht that they're on, that they go to vacation on. Like that's all a miniature. Like all the external shots of that, they actually built that as a model.
Yeah. Anyway, I completely derailed us to the fifth element, which is very much the nature of this podcast. But Dave,
Yeah, that's,
I apologize.
That's to be applauded. I thank you for just
Gary
bringing that
Oldman
up.
and
Yeah.
all right, Gary, tell us the.
You don't like Beethoven. You don't listen. Overtures like that, my juice is flowing. But after his openings, he does tend to get a little fucking boring. That's why I stopped. No. Okay. Try Brahms too. He's good. But man.
They're professional anytime, all the time.
Yeah. Oh gosh. Double D
watched The Professional for the first time because of this podcast.
What?
I know.
Yeah.
And I know he's not talking to you about things on camera like he's supposed to.
I just get random text messages from Double D, which will be the cover art from something that we've dropped a reference to. That he's like, just check this out today. And it's like he's a grown-ass man. It's the first time he's ever seen Leon the Professional before. Like, I mean, where do you even begin with that?
That's incredible. I would love to experience that for the first time as an adult. Like, well, I guess it was kind of adult-ish, but
yeah, I did not see that until a few years ago, like 2 years ago.
Oh,
Really?
well, you can tell us then.
Yeah. So
I would have very conflicted feelings about Natalie Portman.
the
yes.
only way I get around it is she was born the same year I was. So when she was that old when that was made, that's how old I was. So it's okay.
Whatever you got to do to go to sleep at night.
That's right. Listen. For me,
I think I've listened to the commentary. Oh, sorry. What would you say?
I said from his mouth to God's ears. Like,
Yeah.
Amen. No, if you think that one's bad, like you have to watch Crams's Palmer's Pick. All the Real Girls. Is that? Is that? The name of that one?
It's Beautiful Girls.
Beautiful Girls. Jeez, Beautiful Girls. She's like even younger in that, and like legit falls in love with her like 37-year-old neighbor in the movie. Oh man,
I do. Oh man, that makes me want to watch that movie again. Oh, speaking of Palmer's Picks, Steiner, would you be okay with us posting your Palmer's Picks episode on YouTube?
Yeah, knock yourself out.
Outstanding.
I know his name, Solieri.
Solieri.
It may have been, man. What was it? It was Amadeus.
Yeah.
I want to say
That's a good movie, by the way.
Yeah. Princess Bride.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And I guess Empire, maybe. I feel like Empire Strikes Back.
I don't feel like we had.
No, what was your third one?
I guess we'll just have to tune in when you post the Palmer's Picks.
You'll have to check it on YouTube. LWSD. Are we LWSD Pod on YouTube? We should really know this. This is episode 35.
Well, the thing with YouTube is, to pull back the curtain slightly, YouTube no longer lets you have a custom URL, just any old person. You have to qualify in some ways, which we have not yet qualified because that's not where the majority of our viewership
fucking subscribe, people. Jesus,
yes.
This is your fault.
Yes.
We're a big fucking deal, guys.
Yeah. How egomaniac.
Yeah, that's right.
Steiner, you're on your own computer, right? On your laptop. You can go on YouTube and subscribe right now.
Yeah.
I was
closer.
I was in Amsterdam visiting Jacko, and I was telling him about the podcast, and
you know
I
you
think
weren't
YouTube
doing
was up.
You son of a bitch.
Oh, I know. Yeah.
No cake.
Who goes to fucking? When are you gonna go to Amsterdam again? When?
I don't know, but there's so much biking. We're so exhausted.
Palmer.
You should have biked right to a cake shop. That's what you should.
I was too. You're going.
Oh wait, you
I was
hit
too
mute.
busy riding a bike.
Well, there was a lot of bike riding, a lot of activities. We usually didn't get home till late, and 2 nights in a row it was pouring rain. It just didn't happen.
Did you
It
have
sounds like
to?
the perfect pouring rain sounds like the perfect opportunity to be like, you know what? Let's go into this coffee shop for the evening.
Maybe he was washing his hair and he was too busy.
I'm sorry, but anyways, you went to Amsterdam.
Oh, well, I subscribed him on YouTube when I was there, and he's since listened to an episode. You listened to a live stream. I'm like, are you crazy? You listened to the It live stream. I'm like, dude, that's a hell of a place to start.
0 viewers right now.
It's like 4.5 hours. Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, so do go to YouTube and you can check out. We can all find out what Steiner's third Palmer's pick was.
Yeah.
Or alternatively, you can come over to my place and I'll dig out the VCR. And the original copy that you guys gifted me, probably in '99, is still in the footlocker back home. So we can dig it out and watch the original.
Oh,
Fucking
that's
A.
awesome.
I remember what that tape. It's got a red cover, right?
Exactly.
Palmer, do you remember putting those together?
That's the Christmas tape, right? That
Yeah.
we put together, right? So every person got an individualized edition because it was all the stuff that they were in, right? Like
Exactly. 1999, we made a lot of stuff because I had started to work at the Cable Access Center. Palmer's Picks was happening. That was the year we put together the cabin documentary, which was its own tape because it was an hour and a half. We couldn't fit that on the other stuff. But there was the Pearl Jam ran a contest where you could submit a music video for one of their songs from the album Yield, which came out in 1998. And I made
the best Pearl Jam album ever.
It's a good one. Yeah. It's hard to argue with. But I made a music video. I kind of cheated, incorporated some of their performance clips, but so I did not win. But my music video starred Twinkie. I don't know if he remembers that.
I remember that.
I remember the driving in the car.
Yeah. That was a song called MFC, stood for Mini Fast Car. And I basically just translated the lyrics directly. And one of the storylines was you working and everybody was free on the road in that song. That's the rock and roll cliche goes.
Yeah.
But I believe that video found its way onto my copy, my Christmas tape there.
Oh, really? I'm just like, well, they're friends.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Who doesn't want more Twinkie?
I was happy to have it.
Who doesn't?
As possible.
That's right. Who doesn't want more Twinkie?
Well, I think we should post that one too. I'm posting that to the YouTube page, MFC video. There's a photograph my mom took that I have of you and me, Palmer, putting together the cover sleeves of that, which
I remember that day, like we just came over, came over to your house and we just spent the day putting all that crap together.
Yeah, it was. I think I had just gotten a new a stereo as well, which I was unpacking at the time. And I remember the template for what we put together. So it was like this black clamshell cases that sort of like you would get. Oh yeah, like you get from like a Hollywood Video or Blockbuster.
I think that's where I got those cases. Didn't I steal a bunch of cases from Hollywood Video for those? Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah.
And
don't ever. I should not say that.
They're long gone.
Long gone. Yeah.
Oh man.
No, I'm saying I was gonna say something else, but nope, totally pilfered those. They were throwing them out anyway.
Right.
There were so many of them. They sold those for 35 cents.
Recycled. That's right.
Yeah,
we're thinking of the environment the whole time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And I think the American movie was out, so I'd seen and bought Coven on VHS from the guy profiled in that film, Mark Borchardt. And Coven was essentially that was in a clamshell case as well, but it was so obviously done like in Microsoft Word. It was not very sophisticated design at all, and it was a sort of nod, at least on my part, to the back of both have like the main person in the video, like basically just like a selfie, kind of making a, I don't know, like a surprised face. I'm not sure. Yeah. And so Coven was Mark Borchardt and ours was you, which I think you took while photographing the WCTV Clapper Awards that year, which was like the Oscars or the Emmys rather. of cable access
of
in Wadsworth,
public access
Ohio.
for one town. No, just for one town. Not even
Yeah.
Northeast Ohio. One town for Wadsworth.
Yeah. But what's crazy, they'd rent out like one of the better restaurants in town, and
Yeah.
there'd be tons of people. There was such a bustling place. That was a good time. Anyway, yeah, it warms my heart, Steiner, to know that you still have that tape. Yeah.
When you post those, do you tweet them out too? Like from the like once
Usually,
you post them
yeah.
on YouTube? Yeah.
And,
Like,
yeah.
that's awesome.
And I have a Twitter page for the Dreaming Out Loud sort of productions or what, I don't know, but basically it really just is something for me to look back on. There's no followers, I don't think, and I don't care, but it's just to sort of remember dates and stuff.
Remember
my
this
God.
for us.
Yeah, I don't know. It's the thing we were talking about before with the hubris of all of that. I definitely at the time did not think of it as an arrogance, because I was a pretty shy and insecure person, finding some confidence for the first time in this like group of people. But definitely over time, that's easy to understand. But I've also just, especially with this kind of older stuff that's not really important to other people, it comes to be a lot of what I value the most, because in some ways, even though it's so like imitative and whatever, it was so free and unaffected. As ironic as that sounds, even though a lot of it is like imitative, there was no real honest hubris about it. You were just kind of excited about something, so you were doing it as well, and you had a platform to put it out on and sort of feel like you were a part of. I don't know. I don't know a part of what. But nowadays, there's this like big library of stuff that I've been tending to that I value as much as the Criterion collection of like the films of like the best, directors and whatever of our age. But like these people are everyone we're talking about, and the Cabin Kids are they're shoulder to shoulder in my mind. I understand that it's a different scale, but the way that the not necessarily even the nostalgia, but just my affection for those people, like really like balances it to where, Pumps' one performance with Logan in a basement warrants an EP that I made 15 years later out of like a bad recording of it. But I wrote down, so there's two things I was trying to remember. One I wrote down myself, and one was from Bruce Springsteen. It is something to do with like, he was talking about being Bruce Springsteen, which is a very different thing. But essentially you need this balance of insane self-confidence and like almost debilitating insecurity to be like a rock star, or such as it were. And then the thing that I wrote down a few years ago was that I was tired. What was it? Trying to get, I think the main thing was that like I didn't expect the things that I made, certainly in my youth, to be important to other people, but I no longer care to deny that they're important to me. Anyway, I don't know if what that speaks to, but yeah, I don't know. It's a little fishbowl, but it's a fishbowl that I really only could keep in the corner of my room these days, and I'm happy to just like look over at my fish and be like, "Hi, how's it going?" And I smile and walk around, and go do something else.
And now now it's growing though. It's being shared. Like that fishbowl has a purpose that's reaching a larger audience through this podcast and through our YouTube page and Twitter and all that stuff. I mean, look at this. Like, I haven't talked to Steiner for a decade. And this, like that, like bringing that fishbowl to the public, like that that led to this conversation. It's all cyclical.
Yeah. That's what we were doing in 1999 with that VHS.
Yeah, and I think too, to some degree, it's enough to be able to tell the people in your life that they mean something to you, and that they're valuable. Because
absolutely,
the world that we're in, doesn't tend to value those things. And so I think there is a certain amount, if you're using the past in order to propel someone forward, that's one thing, versus using the past to kind of keep you lodged there. And I think, Dave, your intent in cultivating these things isn't to relive your glory days of the cabin, but to recognize recognize what it was and try to evaluate what it was. And you know, even when you shared with me the impact that I had on you in the first, you know, in the episode that we talked about it, to know that other people have an impact on you and can help you along the way, I think is valuable.
Thanks. Yeah, like we said about the past propelling yourself forward, because I get shit from all kinds of stuff. I get shit from like making new stuff, trying to put music out or whatever, or then I step back and take some time to archive this stuff, and the people that want me to make music are like, "What are you fucking doing?" I'm like, "I'm just doing what I need to do to try to like get by." But I love this idea of the past propelling yourself forward, because I feel like this time I've been spending digging back and valuing this stuff, and like you said, trying to like evaluate in myself what it was about that time or where I was coming from that made me feel differently than I do now, that I would like to sort of feel again. Steiner has a genuine cough, I think, or he might be like, "This is getting too much for him."
He was stunned by the amount of bullshit you were spewing, I think is what it was. No. I'm just
no, but it's.
You think after this many years of drinking beer, I'd have learned how to do it properly.
No, you never learn. That's why you got to keep doing it.
Yeah.
I should practice harder then.
That's right.
So I don't want to go on too much about this, but there's this one small thing I've been thinking about recently. And then I know we're not going to do regular segments, but I have this, like, I was going to do a Dave's Digs just because so I have been creating this repository, at least the music that the cabin kids and myself have made. And I finished the first like really satisfying like digital package of one of these things that actually was from someone that I was kind of part of maybe my second cabin, I guess. But so at dreamingoutloudrecords.com, it's basically a Bandcamp skinned site. I now not only have like a handful, I think it's like 12 or so, especially like 10th anniversaries and stuff. I like put together nice versions of these things that we made, have Moto remaster them. There's a bunch there ready sort of to just, and it's always free. That's one of the main things. Like, it's always free. But I also put together recently a like coming soon for the things that I've been intending, which is another like 17 to 20 things from Cabin Kids. That it's been such a joy to go there for me, because I've had this in my head for a while that I want to do all these, make sure all these albums and stuff that people made have a home. And to see the little coming soons is very satisfying. But there's one that we just finished that is the drummer that played with me ever since Logan got a real career. His name is Brian Yost, and then through him I met this other great musician called Jeff Gill, and they toured with me a couple years ago. But they had a trio called NJ's and the Jeff, which I talked about in the last show. But I put up their EP with like the first like honorary Cabin Kids in some ways, because the byline of the Dreaming Out Loud site is something to do with like the, you know, preserving the growing creative and I don't know, whatever. But it's like a group of friends from Northeastern Ohio. And these guys fall into that category, and they're my friends. So like they're this new thing, new addition to that. So that's my Dave Diggs for the week. Go to dreamingoutloudrecords.com. You can see a lot of the music that Cabin Kids made, Steve, etc. But those same guys, they had this group called Midland Uprising, and they put out an album that they made over a few years that was like this conglomeration of a bunch of different performers. And then it happened over such a long period of time that when they put it up, one of them was really, I don't want to get them in trouble or this, but like somebody freaked out and was like, "How dare you use this?" It's not online, so I guess no one would know who this is, even if they do hear this. Was like, "How dare you like include this thing that I recorded when I was drunk one night?" And I'm like, "I'm trying to do something serious and music, and you fucked it up, and we're not friends anymore," and all this.
Wait, this person did this to you?
No, they did this to them, like
Okay.
Jeff and Yost, and so they pulled those tracks from this album, not the one that's up on the Dreaming Out Loud site, but it just I was just far enough removed from having been trying to do quote unquote something serious in the music business myself to realize how that person might feel, but also how absurd that is.
Right.
Like, and you know, like this thing that they're mad exists was making other people happy, you know? And that's one of the things that helped me to start to embrace those things about my past that maybe I tried to exclude from creating some sort of music persona for people who didn't know me. I was like, well, this is just like some specific part of me that I value. I enjoyed kind of cultivating that as well. But over the last few years, I've become more and more interested in delving into my past to find the things that really made me feel like confident and strong. And a lot of that was like just dumb stuff like JCVD or Bruce Lee. Like, so now I am embracing all of that stuff
in like Batman pajamas.
Yeah, exactly. And it's so liberating and empowering to remember that ridiculousness and acknowledge it for what it is, but also like literally sort of feel the strength of my youth in that way. Has been, I don't know. I hadn't had the words for what Twinkie said like a half hour ago before I started talking about your past propelling yourself forward. But that is, that can be a really powerful thing. Certainly something that I've been reveling in throughout the duration specifically of this podcast. But, oh my God, sorry. You touched a nerve there. Let's get back to Steiner somehow.
Well, I actually have a question, if I may, for you guys.
Sure.
Related to kind of what Twinkie is driving at, of the impact of the cabin moving into the future, you know, from that time. And so I know all four of us, knowing our stories, we all transitioned from the cabin time in some shorter, some a little bit longer, but not too long. We went down paths in our lives that we have since recanted, or at least switched gears again. And I'd ask you guys to share as much as you're comfortable with on these topics. But I know for myself that after the cabin, that's when I graduated high school, and you know, that's of course a time of change. I went off to college. And I got married right around then, very shortly thereafter, in 2000. And I kind of went down a totally different path and kind of lost touch with everybody. And went to pursue other things. And that path kind of lasted until 2000, between 2007 and 2009. So just about 10 years, so they're less than 10 years ago. And since then, I've taken a totally different tack. And for my part, at least, I've put a wall up, or a block. I don't think back to those days, the high school, you know, the cabin era, into those roughly 10 years that followed. And so I haven't really digested it or thought about it. And that's why I had some trouble answering some of these questions of what did you get out of the cabin, or how did things go? I'm like, well, I kind of blocked all that off. I don't really think about it. I'm in this new phase, like I guess you could say a third phase, or maybe even maybe not a fourth, maybe a third and a half phase. But for me, trying to process it, I'm wondering how, in a way, all four of us coming from similar yet dissimilar backgrounds ended up heading down a track after school, and then switching gears later. I'd be interested in hearing your guys' thoughts on that topic.
I have tons to say always, but I talk a lot, so.
Yeah. So just to kind of clarify, so I understand what you're asking, Steiner, just how we ended up where we are now, or why we maybe view the world the way we do. coming from where we came from?
Maybe a better way to ask what I'm asking is, why did we end up going down the paths we did, and then end up changing them? Because it seems like other people maybe they just keep rolling straight out of high school.
Yeah.
You know, they keep rolling through college, and they got
then
their partners and their life and everything comes together. Whereas a common thread for the four of us, I feel, and please correct me if I'm misinterpreting things, but you know, the four of us kind of had to take a turn at a certain point and get off the track that we were on coming out of high school.
Yeah.
You know, we all kind of realized that the trajectory we were on was not what we wanted.
Yep. Well, I mean, I guess I can take a stab at it because the cabin is always one of those things that, since, you know, in my adult life, it was all like, my thinking about it was always cyclical, in the sense of, it sounds like the uncle from Napoleon Dynamite that's like, you know, oh man, if I could go back to 82, coach would put me in. And like, when I say it out loud, it sounds like that, where I'm just like, I just can't let go of the past. But really, when I come back to the cabin, it's always at like the worst times of my life, where I'm trying to like look back to, I know I was genuinely happy in that period of my life. And it's always like a reset for me. Like when I'm going through something shitty, I can always, what was it about that time period that when I was genuinely happy? So as I'm like, after the cabin, you know, I go through college. I dropped out of college for like a year, ended up meeting my first wife, got married. That all fell apart and like didn't work. You know, I feel like I've changed paths multiple times, even in my adult life, like even recently, where, you know, I went to college to be a teacher, and I felt like that's what I wanted to do from the time I was in 6th grade, you know, and up until recently was I like, fuck that noise. Like, you know what I mean? Like it literally, and it really was like that, kind of like a switch just flipped, where it was just like, no. But it's always funny how in those times when I'm going down those paths, you know, I think happiness, it is a driving force for it's logical for any human being to say I'm driven by my own happiness, right? Like, so I'm going to obviously like steer my path towards things that make me more happy. You don't steer, I mean, it's just logical. You don't steer towards things that make you sad, right? There's always going to be things that are put in your path that are sad or that are out of your control. But if you can control it, you're going to steer it towards things that make you happy. And so the cabin is, for me anyways, is always like, it's this thing that it's like, it's just like that course correction. Well, let's start back there. And what was it about that made you happy? And what, you know, and even if it is just like a little bit of sunshine on like a fucking year and a half's worth of like cloudy days, you know, and you just kind of go back there in your mind's eye just to get a little bit of sunshine. I don't think that's pathetic if that helps you get through the fucking day and not drive your car into the goddamn bridge embankment. You know what I mean? Like, how is that a bad thing? You know? So, yeah, I mean, does that answer your question? Is that what you were going for?
Sure. Because at this point, I'm not sure what I was going for, but yes.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
all right.
Thank you for sharing on that.
Well,
yeah, no problem.
I would take a quick kind of approach. For me, at least, I don't know if I was ever really or am really satisfied, unless I'm asking questions or pushing a little bit on the boundaries or being pushed. You know, from my path, I think maybe the jog that you may be referring to, Steiner, is the fact that I went to college for probably a year and a half, or maybe even just a year. And then I ended up joining the apostolic church that I grew up in, which we've referenced a couple times. And I was in that church for 3.5 years, 4 years. And then I left that church. And then from there kind of wandered up to Alaska for some college for the air traffic control thing. And I've kind of remained on a similar course from there. But for me, the motivation for those things was a sort of, I guess, intellectual honesty, at least initially, because I knew when I was going to that church that I was faking it to a large degree. I wasn't really the person that other people probably saw me as, because I was just trying to check all the boxes and be all the things. So I'd like to believe that, you know, whether it's Palmer recognizing that he wasn't maybe in the relationship he wanted to be in, or whatever it is, maybe a willingness to just say, hey.
Or Palmer's ex-wife realizing she wasn't in the relationship that she wanted to be in. That is probably more accurate if we're going to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like we're being honest right now, so I just needed to interject. I'm sorry.
Fair enough. No. I do not claim to understand the inner goings of your relationship.
Nor do I want to put that can be my entire response to the question.
I don't understand them either.
Yeah. But I guess to me, it's like being almost a willingness on my part to be like, I'm wrong right now. Where I'm at is not correct. What do I need to do to correct that? How do I change what I'm doing to make myself feel like I'm being honest about who I am as a person and reflect it outward above everybody else? Why else would I like leave everything I've ever known and the comfort of all of that to be ostracized and, you know, kind of cast aside? I mean, nobody chooses, I think, to want to be the weirdo or the one that's like wrong or going to hell or any number of other things. But I think it comes from a point of saying, I'm not where I want to be. This isn't who I am. Who am I? What am I doing? And at least giving it a shot. I've definitely gotten more comfortable over my life saying I'm wrong. I screwed up. How do I fix it? And I think maybe part of that comes from that intellectual honesty. Go ahead, Dave. You know you want to.
Oh, man.
You know you want to, Dave.
I really appreciate a lot of that that you just said. I mean, for me, similarly to Palmer, like the choice to switch gears wasn't so much mine. It turned out that the marriage I was in very soon after it started turned out not to be what I thought it was, in the simple fact that I think my then wife realized she didn't want to be married to me. And then I had to adjust from there. I married someone that I met at the cabin. So that was an extension of that experience for me. And I think, I don't know, I was going to say maybe somehow extra hard because it was related to that, but I don't think so, actually. And it was when that happened. So I had moved away. I'd moved to North Carolina, where she was going to school. And yeah, I'd sort of left everything in Ohio that I knew just to basically follow this relationship. And when I realized it was over, I came back and I lived in my parents' basement. And I was so deeply ashamed that I had this failed marriage that really caught. I mean, the whole thing was. I mean, in hindsight, I see it much more clearly, or could have seen it coming or recognized the problems, but it wasn't like we fought or things like that. There were some essential missing components, but even that I wasn't necessarily. I just didn't have a frame of reference to know to recognize the red flags, because it was also my first and only real serious relationship. So, yeah. Anyway, but. So I was back in Ohio, licking my wounds, and again, trying to remember when I was last felt sort of happy and strong, and sort of my whole world was turned upside down, especially because of the surprise of everything not being what I thought it was. So you start to question so much of what you know or believe to be true about the people around you and yourself. And yeah, the cabin wasn't that far in the past at that point, and enough people were still around Ohio that I was hiding out at my parents'. And I think I heard from Pumps first, actually, who was going through a pretty serious breakup of his own at the time. I can't remember the specifics, other than I was trying to be on, like, just sort of be, I didn't want anyone to know, I don't know where I was or what I was doing. I was so ashamed. And then suddenly, like, Pumps walked into my parents' living room where I was. I was like, what the fuck is going on? And then we started to talk about what was going on with him. And I think soon thereafter, my mom might have run into Palmer, or perhaps his ex-wife, probably Palmer, because I don't think she would have known her. And then I started to spend time over at their house. They were still together, Palmer and his ex-wife at the time, and that was very helpful to me. And I spoke recently, or semi-recently, on this podcast about witnessing this thing where my dad saw I witnessed my dad in the company of some old friends of his. And after many years of health struggles, and I think a lot of just kind of losing himself through intense hardships, remembered who he was to them. And that sort of brought it out in him. And I think I've experienced that a lot through sort of cabin kid encounters, going back to, say, this time when I was newly separated on my way to being divorced, and at age 20, oh fuck, I fuck up the age because that's a big anecdote in my life I returned to around this time. So I know the year would have been 2003 or 2004. I have the specific memory. I'm not sure if I told this on the podcast, but that whole sort of derailment of the marriage and the divorce and everything was such a turning point in my young life. And I was so very fortunate to essentially, despite my best efforts of hiding out, fall into the arms of the cabin kids that were still around. And I remember being in the backyard. Oh, so I don't have a nickname for her. So I was in Katie Hammond's backyard.
Wait, real quick. We need to have Katie Hammond on the podcast. I think she would do it too. If you could,
yeah, maybe.
You're welcome to delete this as well, but.
Oh no, that'd be amazing. And I honestly, like, what does she have to hide? Anything? But yeah,
other than being an incredible, amazing person, she has nothing to hide.
Yeah.
She doesn't want to be associated with us with Brad.
Understandable.
Yeah. Who can blame her, really?
We totally understand if you want to say no, but
you're such a super lady.
Well, I'm sure with Steiner it was just like, oh yeah, come on out to Colorado, come and visit. By the way, and like he lands.
I totally suckered him into it. Yeah,
he's like, by the way, on Wednesday night we're gonna record this episode of this podcast.
Yeah, he's actually locked in my basement with me.
He's got to put at least 3 hours in before you'll undo the chain.
That's right.
Well, so I was in her backyard with Pumps, and I remember I can't remember very many times in my life where I'm just like laying on my back in the grass as a grown human being, but I was with her and Pumps, and I was bemoaning what was going on with me at the time, and I was like, fucking sucks, and I'm like, and I'm gonna be 24, and like, what am I fucking doing? And then there was this silence. I'm still amazed to this day that they knew better than me, but somebody was like, you're not gonna be 24. I was like, oh yeah, I mean that suck. And they're like, no, you're gonna be 25. I was like, no, that is,
fuck you guys too.
Yeah, that's totally wrong. You don't know what you're talking about. And that, like, I had to get out my driver's license, and they were right. And I had somehow lost an entire year in my own mental clock of like how old I was.
Nice.
Anyway, but
was Katie still friends at the time with?
Oh yeah, I mean,
not really. Or
I mean, probably not close so much that they were in constant contact or anything.
Okay.
And I do remember a general sentiment on the part of like my ex-wife of like, well, they're your friends now, I guess, something like that.
Oh.
And it was weird too, because it wasn't acrimonious between her and I. Like,
Yeah.
but there was
no. Yeah, I and I'm not throwing barbs. I've actually, I don't know. I probably know Katie better than I know any of the other, as they were affectionately known, the Smithville girls. But
yes, yeah.
just because I somehow, which is why I want to talk to her, somehow just like bonded with her in a fairly platonic way, as much as platonic as any 17, 18-year-old boy can be. But like somewhat platonically, it really did. And I've
platonic meaning she put you in the friend zone, right? Like,
yeah.
that's what like, as any platonic 17-year-old boy can be with a female.
Yeah.
No, I can relate to that.
Make myself
honestly.
look good.
No, you don't have to make yourself look good. I relate to that same thing.
Seriously, I was placed in the friend zone by Katie. Like, are you kidding me? Like,
I think sometimes that's something a person can put out, and Kate was always she was very good at kind of making that. Yeah, definitely. There's like a sisterly thing there. There was never like a questioned situation, at least not for me. No. So I definitely not to make so as you won't feel bad. Hopefully, Twinkie, I experienced the same thing.
No, and I don't. I mean, no. I just, Katie, if you're listening to this, you should be on the podcast so you can just tell us all to shut up and you can give us the real scoop. But the reason I kind of asked you the question about her friendship is because Katie definitely seemed like the person who would just tell it straight, not because she was trying to be mean or anything else, but just because that's how she saw it, and she was interested in keeping the conversation to what it was. So it seems like she would correct you on your age.
Well, and also she was great. She is. I mean, I haven't seen her in a while, but she's a tremendous friend, as a lot of cabin kids are, and was not. I have. Not as much as when I was younger, because I work at it really hard, but I have a profound propensity to wallow, and I remember her at the time saying like, being very kind, but also saying like I'd love to coddle you, or like she's like I want to coddle you, but I won't, and this is why, and
that sounds exactly.
It was all of that kind of thing. Her and Pumps, and then getting to spend time then with Palmer, and Larry was around a lot at the time. Really helped me start to remember who I was prior to this divergent path that Steiner had asked about. And then for me, that remembering who I was and trying to process that time resulted in a very prolific kind of period of like 10 years of turning that turmoil into like going out and playing music for people in public, which was great fun and all of that and very rewarding, but ultimately kind of ran a course of me having to like wrestle with that idea of like why are you doing this? And, if I don't want to get into all that, but I will say of the cabin thing is in the last like 2 years or so, I have again consciously looked back to that time, largely through this podcast, but even prior to it starting, I was starting to go through these archives and stuff that I talked about. In lieu of having those people to hang out with that I just mentioned, like in person, like I got to experience in 2004 to help me remember who I was, looking back through this media and the creative expressions of myself and the people we're talking about has helped me remember who I was prior to this sort of second divergent path. It's a nice reset. It's a great and invaluable reset for me.
Yeah.
So Palmer, I'm sorry, I'm going to do that.
That's it, period.
Steiner, since you asked the question, now you get to answer the question, because normally when you're asking a question, you're probably coming from some sort of place at which you're asking the question. So I'd be curious as to, from your, first of all, talk about, if you're comfortable, your diverging path, and then what, if you think there's a link between people in the cabin who experience that, or why you think that maybe there's it sounds to me like there's some resiliency at least in all of our stories. I would like to believe that. And why you, well, the question you asked why, and then,
So the first thing, the reason the question came to mind was I thought about the four of us and how there was kind of this common thread of going down a path immediately after the cabin era, and then making a shift after a period of time. So mostly I just wanted to get your guys' thoughts on that, since it seemed to be a shared thing that we had engaged in. And as you guys have mentioned, some of the other cabin kids have had a similar experience where they made choices at that time and have since reversed them. I guess for myself, the kind of the interesting thing to me is that, thinking more about it as you guys were talking, that kind of was my course coming out of the cabin, coming out of high school, was that I ended up doing what I thought I was supposed to do. I ended up doing what, was the norm for our environment. I ended up doing kind of all that I knew. I didn't know that there were other ways. And that was probably affected by when I went off to college. I didn't really go off to college. I had already had a relationship finishing high school, and that persisted through the transition to college. I didn't go far away for college. When I was out there, I was back home every weekend and every break. So there wasn't really an escape, you could say. There wasn't really a chance to experience a different setting. Probably also compounded by the fact that the college I went to was also in small town Northeast Ohio Northern Ohio, but with a similar milieu that we grew up in. And there wasn't a whole lot of difference to be experienced. A lot of other people may have went off at that time and experienced a whole new world and had their mind changed. So I just kind of soldiered on and did what I thought I should do. And I should say I did what I thought was right at the time. I don't have regrets about my choices per se. I don't have regrets about my decision making. I don't feel that I actively went against what I thought at the time. It just took a long time for me to realize that really wasn't who I was, or that really wasn't what I wanted. And I think a little bit similar to you, Palmer and Dave, and different from Twinkie's experience, I kind of just rode the rails through that experience, and then things changed around me. I didn't have the intentionality that Twinkie did of saying, wait, stop. This isn't where I want to be. I'm going to change. I ended up in a position where things changed around me and I had to adapt. And then even now, 10 years later, I'm perhaps, hopefully, maybe figuring out what I want to do or what I want to be or how I want to approach things, and perhaps finally growing up. Maybe that's a weird thing to say.
That's overrated.
I would tend to agree and disagree all at the same time. Growing up is a whole topic I'm sure we could delve into.
Absolutely.
But that's
for the next time you're on. Next time you're on the podcast,
we can share depressing work stories about being adults and how we should take on more responsibility in order to advance things.
Bullshit. Yeah.
No way, man. I just created the biggest stink to have less responsibility. I can help you out. Here's how you throw a wrench in that machine.
But I hope, Twinkie, I addressed what you were asking, and maybe kind of wrap up this part where we've all went through and shared our thoughts on that matter. Yeah.
Awesome.
Jump in with anything.
I have a proposition, gentlemen.
Does
Let's
it involve beer and breaks?
let's take one more pee break. Come back, and I want Twinkie to do his high level Blade Runner, and we'll wrap it after that. How's that
I
sound?
like it.
All right.
All right.
Huge critical praise and like really lackluster box office stuff.
Yeah, it definitely did kind of bomb at the box office.
It's just people don't want to think, man.
Yeah.
Fucking Disney. It's all Disney's fault. Like, I mean,
Blame it on Disney.
yeah,
Fucking Disney.
fucking Disney.
Fuck that guy. Am I right?
No, they figured out the formula for like the blockbuster.
Yeah. It did.
And so
I'll
now
tell
that's
you,
what everybody wants to make, you know?
sure, I'll talk about this more, but it's made me. I've watched since Blade Runner. I've watched Fury Road twice.
Oh, I'm looking for any excuse to watch Fury Road again. So
Yeah, it's such a fucking good movie.
Fury Road. I really need to see that.
oh my gosh, is it so good?
Yeah, it's good.
I read this really awesome that it's an allegory for retirement. It's literally like so their epic quest to get to this like Eden, right? Is like his quest to get to retirement, him and his wife, because his wife edited all of his movies too, right?
Oh, George
So-
Miller, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So it was like this quest for them to get to retirement. That was the promised land, which was like supposed to be this like green space that like they're trying to get to in Fury Road, right? And then they get to retirement and they realize that it's just like a wasteland and boring. And so it brings him right back to where they started, which is what they do in the movie. They go right back to where they started, which is like him going back to Mad Max. And like, it's deeper than that, but it was really interesting when I read that. So
That's pretty great. I follow that immediately. That's pretty.
yeah,
I like that.
Man, though, that movie is fucking fantastic. Just like, talk about zero exposition, how you can like be immersed
Yeah.
in a completely foreign world and get zero exposition, and by the end totally understand the mythos about it, and just like, oh man, the War Boys and the like Chrome Eternal, Jesus, that shit is good.
Valhalla. Yeah.
Yeah, man.
I think it's fun if you don't know. Oh, sorry. Go ahead, Twinkie. Go, please.
No, I was going to say that, which is why I kind of briefly mentioned in our off microphone dialogue that why kind of in my mind at least have Blade Runner 2049 parallels Mad Max, just in the sense that the expectation is definitely on the shoulder of the viewer. There's no, as in the original Blade Runner, they had that voiceover by Rick Deckard or Harrison Ford's character to kind of walk people through it, because they weren't confident that they could place the weight of understanding or processing what's happening on the viewer. And so in 2049, it is most definitely on the viewer. You are required to be present at the theater or your couch to process what's happening, and they need your brain, to be there as well, which is why I did kind of, production values as well, but also just in the process of you're getting what you're getting. We're throwing it at you, and it's up to you to be an active participant in cinema, which is not asked of us a lot, which is, I kind of refer to it as the anti-Marvel, not as a slight, because I like the Marvel spectacle or Star Wars spectacle as much as the next person.
Sure.
But it isn't those things. And I think that's why it probably performed as poorly as it did at the box office, simply because it wasn't It wasn't that. I mean, there's other reasons, or potential other reasons. But I wanted to, in my discussion of Blade Runner, very high level, no spoilers. I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in kind of addressing. We talked about maybe me recording some of my takes on it.
Yeah, I'm trying to introduce a segment into the show called Twinkie's Take. That you just send us your thoughts on things. Yeah. Asynchronistic of the recording sessions. Like so. Yeah.
And I definitely want that to be a thing. And I actually wanted it to happen on this. But the movie was challenging to me personally. And you know, the movie asks a lot of questions. So when you watch the movie, there's a storyline, there's a plot, right? I mean, that's a movie. There's a plot. You can watch it as point A to point B to point C, and watch the set pieces and watch the action and watch the dialogue. And it's a movie, and you can watch it as that. But I think just like the original Blade Runner, there's a lot of subtext that it's asking, and primarily it asks in its subtext, what does it mean to be a human? At least to me, that's what it says. And in the past year or so, I have made decisions in my own life, and they're not like criminal decisions. I know nobody here is going to get subpoenaed to answer criminal decisions, but I've made less than desirable decisions in my life in the last year that have just caused pain to people that I love and care about. And I'm not going to get any more in depth than that. But in watching the movie, it was really challenging to me when it asks what it meant to be a human being, in the sense that these people have created, again, we're not anywhere near spoiler territory, but they've created these android objects that do jobs that a lot of people don't want to do. And just if you're familiar with the original Blade Runner, we kind of discovered that the android, they're referred to as replicants in the Blade Runner kind of mythos, might be more human than humans, in the sense that they can they end up being able to evaluate things empathetically. The famous Tears in Rain speech that comes from Rutger Hauer's character in Blade Runner, where it's very clear that he understands the pain in the world and what he's caused. So I found it really challenging to be able to sit down and record something for Blade Runner 2049, because this 2.5 hour high production value spectacle movie ended up being way more intensely personal than I had originally thought it was. And I wasn't able, at least in my mind, to be able to objectively record a take on it, or at least that I was comfortable with. And I've had some space and time since then, and conversations and things. But I think if you get a chance to watch it, and you get a chance to ask yourself, what makes humans special, or what about us, what about a human makes us different than everybody else? Is it because of how special we are or how good we are? Or is it because we do have flaws and foibles, and we are not immune to failures? And maybe the humanness is how we react to it and how we deal with it, rather than some level of rigid mathematical analysis, which you would expect from some sort of android. So, first of all, Blade Runner 2049 is probably what you've read it out to be. It's a cinematic, in my opinion, masterpiece as far as visuals and sound and acting and all of those things you would check mark. And then I'm sure it will win various awards. But the intensely personal stuff certainly wasn't lost on me. And that's what I take away and value most from it, are those types of things.
Outstanding. Yeah,
I mean, watch the first one and then go see that one this weekend. That's what I'm going to do.
Yeah.
The bride and I watched because I consulted you, as I remember Palmer doing, I think for similar reasons, like which version should we watch? I think I watched the theatrical version only a few years ago. In the last 5 years, probably even in the last 3 years. It's the first time I saw it. And I saw it with the voiceover and all that. And then, so we watched the final cut in the last few weeks in anticipation of her wanting to see the new one. And it didn't feel any different to me. Like, and I don't remember, like, it's not like I don't know. Yeah, it's hard to imagine that stuff was necessary. We talked to Mr. J in the last episode. He was talking about enjoying the voiceover from the theatrical version because it felt like that much more of a noir vibe, which after he said that made me excited to revisit that version, which I might, because I got from the library like the 4-disc edition of like,
it's fantastic.
It's got 3 complete archival versions and the final cut and the 2-hour making of feature-length documentary and something else. So I'm very excited to dig into all that. But it's so crazy, like literally 2 to 4 times we have discussed and put off just going to any movie, always intending to go to this movie. So that's going to happen. We gotta talk to you again, I think, after Palmer and I have both seen it, and we can really dig in.
Yeah, and
maybe
I would
Steiner
enjoy that too.
If he's up for it. You got Steiner. Have you seen the first one?
I have, but it's been a while, and I can't say my recollection of it is particularly useful. So, but I would definitely be in and revisiting that and seeing 2049.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that we could just do a whole Blade Runner episode.
Yeah, there's definitely enough material there. I mean, I think just the impact, we can go through directors. I think, I don't know if I mentioned this before or not, but there's like, even in Rogue One, there's a shot of it's right before the scene. Well, there's a shot where it's descending into like a city, and it's literally a 5-second shot for shot remake of that first like descent into the street level view of Blade Runner. And you can see the impact that movie's had on science fiction creators ever since. And you talk to any person who, like, I would love to ask Ryan Johnson, the director of Episode 8, like, what impact has Blade Runner had on you? Because you know it. I mean, all of it, Looper and all those movies, that Blade Runner has impacted that style of like.
I mean, I really think that any of that sci-fi noir, which I think Looper is like totally sci-fi noir. Mm-hmm. Anything of those can find their roots back to that. I heard this really awesome factoid on the original Blade Runner that if it wouldn't, there was a writer's strike that happened around that period in time, which caused the post-production of Blade Runner to like fall into this quagmire. So just to keep the wheels spinning, they just got to keep working and working and working on the visuals. Like, so if that strike wouldn't have happened, they would have just like rushed out the movie and got it out. But because they had all this extra time, they really got to like take their time and finalize a lot of the visuals, which, I mean, it pays off. I mean, they still stand up to today's stuff. So it's definitely interesting. I mean, there's so much, I mean, from what's the guy, John Batiste in there, and Jared Leto, and you got Harrison Ford coming back. I mean, everything about it is appealing. I just haven't had a chance to see it yet.
And it doesn't shy away from some certain shocks in the sense that it asks questions about how we value certain segments of populations or genders or any of those things. It asks, I think, in my mind, if you're willing to look or able to look or interested in looking or whatever, if it asks questions about how we view segments of society, certainly.
Yeah.
Crazy. Twinkie, I am definitely interested in watching this and then engaging in another shithouse philosophers talk.
Yes! Oh my God, that's the name of the show. That's going to be the title of that episode.
I like it.
Digging into this nature of humanity and discussing all that. So I'm definitely in on that.
Awesome. Well, we would be More than happy to have you back, Steiner, for sure. This has been an absolute blessing. Please get my number from Twinkie.
Oh, absolutely.
And when you're back in Ohio, if you're ever down Dayton Way, man, we'd love to have you up for the weekend. So
that would be fantastic. And just to tell you guys, Dave, got the original link for the podcast from your Dreaming Out Loud mailing list, just like Twinkie.
Oh, wow.
That's
I
awesome.
listened to the few episodes up until the first Cabin Kids with Twinkie. Listened to those earlier this year, and I was on hiatus. And once we solidified our plans here for me to come out to Denver to visit Twinkie, I went on a bender and crammed I forget how many it was, 20-some episodes in 11 days.
Oh my
Whoa,
gosh,
that's got to be so many hours.
Like,
Approximately 4,000 hours.
Yeah. Holy shit.
Oh man.
I am both proud and a little embarrassed to say that I am current up to yesterday's episode. I am now current.
Oh my God.
I'm not even current. I am like, oh my gosh.
And I am nearly
Crazy.
complete in terms of my podcast listening. I would also like to mention that I have experimental evidence from this weekend that Des Moines is in fact three LWSDs from Ohio.
All right.
3 LWSDs from Colorado. So
It is midpoint then. That's perfect.
I drove out here to Colorado, and you guys were in my ears the entire way.
Wow.
It was
man.
immensely enjoenjoyable.
Oh, bless
well,
your
at least
heart.
You had
Holy
plenty of
cow.
material to get you through. I mean,
Oh,
geez.
more than enough. More than
Yeah. More than enough. It was enjoyable, but it was more than enough, let me tell you.
Wow.
Oh man. See, that's why, like, this is I don't care if anybody else listens. Like, that kind of stuff right there is like makes it worth it. For
Yeah,
sure.
That's how I
would
feel
love to
too.
come back on and discuss all of the podcasts I put on hold over the last week to listen to you guys.
Oh, well,
man.
give shout outs to your regulars.
Yeah, what do you
man.
listen to?
As Twinkie has mentioned in the past, the Dan Carlin Hardcore History and Common Sense. As Dave has mentioned in the past, W2F with Mark Maron, which I also came to late and enjoy listening to his interviews. There's a couple of local Cleveland sportscasters who do a podcast called A to Z, which is great because it means I can stay abreast on the various happenings in Northeast Ohio related to sports without having to listen to actual sports radio, which would drive me insane.
Yeah.
Skeptic's Guide to the Universe, the Geologic Podcast with George Hrobb, which are both skeptic-centered, which is an interesting rabbit hole to go down. I will continue to go on, and we should really... I would love to spend more time going through my podcast playlist and discussing it with you guys.
Wow, well, we'd love to hear it. Thank you so much for putting all that stuff on hold to get current. Jesus Christ!
man.
And of course to come on here and talk to us. And
Oh no!
great.
Did you go through all the all the book club stuff too and everything?
So I'm not gonna lie, I did skip a fair bit of Dead Zone.
That's
Son
okay.
of a bitch!
I think
You're
that's okay.
fired.
Like, it's
You're
very like
fired.
Dead Zone centric. Like,
I did listen to a bit of the beginning, and I realized, oh shit, I have a ton of material to get through. Come out of here.
yeah.
Like 50 hours.
But I did listen to kind of your guys' wrap up because I am not spoiler adverse for a lot of these things. I enjoyed your guys' discussion of it because I had no intention of watching it or reading it, and I love hearing your summary of it. Other than Last Jedi, no Last Jedi spoilers for me. I'm on lockdown.
none here
I'm on
either.
lockdown until December. So
Yep,
I haven't even seen-
I didn't even watch the newest trailer.
no, I've not watched any trailers. I don't want to know anything. I want to go to the theater and experience it for what it is. And I
Good
guess
or bad?
I guess
Because this is the one that's going to determine if these new movies are worth it.
Oh, don't.
It's not gonna
I
be
don't even
bad.
wanna go
Are
down
you
this rabbit hole.
crazy?
Yeah.
No,
Other
no,
than
no.
to say, I am part of Palmer's household where there are only 3 movies that have ever been produced in the Star Wars universe.
Yes, that's it.
There are no prequels. There is nothing else. There is only episodes. For some reason, they're mysteriously numbered 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah.
But in my
I put
heart,
Rogue One in there.
My heart,
I like
there's 1,
Rogue
2,
One
and
a
3.
lot.
Oh,
So-
I will come back and argue with you about Rogue One as well.
Oh, no, I know there's shit. I know there's people that think Rogue One is shit, but man.
Rogue One is the reason I'm on lockdown for episode 8, because I had listened to too much in my podcast listening. I heard too many things, and I went into Rogue One and ended up coming out disappointed. So
Yeah.
I'm quarantined until December in Star Wars land.
That's totally fair.
I've watched all the things. I go online and speculate with people. I love it. I will keep speculating. I will keep watching the things.
Twinkie is always like it never fails. He's always like the opposite. He's just like
Hype train.
Yeah, like
I'm gonna be on that hype. Hype train coming through.
oh man. Oh, we're gonna end on the hype train.
Yeah, that's
Steiner,
my favorite thing
it was
ever.
An absolute pleasure having you on.
Thank you guys for having me. I enjoyed every bit. It's everything I hoped it would be. Listening to all 33 episodes prior to this. So
yeah.
Wow. Likewise. Please join us anytime. And I need to know this bar story. So
we will absolutely get back to that and talk. I would love to talk to each of you guys about our second cabins.
Yeah, absolutely. We have the whole next time you're on. We have all the topics already.
Yeah, give me a call anytime.
Yeah, awesome, man. Sweet. Well, this has been episode 35 of Long Walk Short Drink. I'm Palmer.
Hey, Twinkie from Denver, also representing Akron, Ohio.
Hello.
Yeah. Dave, talking today from Northfield, Minnesota, but of course representing Rittman, Ohio.
And this is Steiner. I'm in Denver today, but I will soon return home to Akron.
Awesome.
City.
And I always am in Dayton, Ohio. Thanks a lot for listening. You guys have a great day, and we'll catch you in the next episode.
Cheers.
Right on.
Long walk, short drink. Long walk, short drink. You've taken that long walk, oh short drink. This was a long walk, fucking short drink. Yeah. We'll get there eventually.